Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sergeant Munoz, Socorro PE. This meeting is the city of Socorro is set to begin. Gentlemen, please remove your hats, and everyone, please silence all electronic equipment. No disruptive behavior or outbursts will be tolerated, and violators are subject to ejection and possible prosecution. La Junta del Concilio de la Ciudad de Socorro está por comenzar. Caballeros, por favor, de quitarse las cachuchas o sombreros, y todos, por favor, poner en silencio todo equipo electrónico. No se va a tolerar ningún tipo de comportamiento prejudicial o revoltoso. A que no siga estas reglas se le sacará y puede ser infraccionado. Gracias.
It is now 6:01 p.m. This meeting is called to order. Item number 2, Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3, recognition to elementary students from Escontrias Elementary School. Andre Holguin. Thank you. Gabriela Gutierrez. Thank you. Jacqueline Terrazas. Thank you. Ariel Ramirez. Thank you. Iker Treviso. Thank you. Thank you. Item number 4, establishment of quorum.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Here.
Alejandro Garcia,
Here.
Mayor Ivy Avalos,
Here.
Rudy Cruz Jr.,
Here.
and Ivan Colombia Lobos is absent. Mayor, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Commissioner Ileana Holguin.
Item number 5, public comments.
Mayor, we have one speaker, Angelina Ramos.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and Olivia. Ms. Ramos is here for the item regarding the Wingstop rock wall. Should she speak now or should she wait for that item? Okay. No, you can wait for the item.
Mayor, and no, we don't have any other
We
speakers.
don't have any speakers.
Okay, so I'd like to begin with a motion to move items number 31, 32, 34, 28, 35, and 36.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 31, discussion and action to adopt Resolution 683, recognizing and supporting Special Olympics Texas Area 19 for their contributions to this community.
Motion to approve.
Second. Let me speak on this item real quick. This is my item. We're actually going to start working in collaboration with the Special Olympics here in the city of Socorro. There isn't a collaboration, and now there will be, and Socorro will hopefully be the capital of the valley for our Special Olympic athletes here in Socorro. Thank you.
Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Socorro that whereas Special Olympics Texas Area 19, SOTX, is an organization committed to providing opportunities for individuals with intellectual disabilities to develop physical fitness, demonstrate courage, experience joy, and participate in a sharing of gifts, skills, and friendship. And whereas SOTX started June 1963. Eunice Kennedy Shriver started a summer day camp for children and adults with intellectual disabilities at her home in Maryland to explore their capabilities in a variety of sports and physical activities. And whereas the City of Socorro is fully committed to support SOTX Area 19 vision mission with their contributions they make to our community. And whereas the City of Socorro encourages residents of our community to support this cause to bringing people with and without intellectual disabilities together. And whereas the City of Socorro will recognize the contributions to this community by supporting SOCTX Area 19 on March 3rd, 2022. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Socorro, Texas, Section 1, that this council and on behalf of the administration and citizens of the Socorro, Texas, hereby support Special Olympics Texas Area 19 for their continuous involvement and presence in the community as we help them continue their work towards an inclusive world. Section 2, that this resolution shall be entered upon the permanent record of the City of Socorro, and a certified copy hereof shall be presented to Special Olympics Texas Area 19. Section 3, that this resolution shall become effective immediately upon its passage, passed and approved this third day of March 2022. Thank you.
Mr. Garcia, do you have anyone representing Special
Not
Olympics
today.
Area 19? Okay.
Thank you.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 32, discussion and action to adopt Resolution 684, recognizing and supporting Public School Week, February 21st through the 25th, 2022.
Motion to approve?
Second.
It's a resolution.
Do you have any words before?
Yeah, so this is especially personal to me, public schools, as a public school teacher, and our kids that we just honored here today. Public School Week was the last week of our February. So that is something where we need to make sure that our public school students are get recognized in our public schools here, especially in Socorro, get recognized for being a public school. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Socorro that whereas this year Public Schools Week is February 21st to the 25th, and it serves as a time to celebrate the achievements of our public schools and honor the significant contributions and accomplishments of students, parents, educators, and education advocates. Whereas the existence of a strong, effective system of free public education for all children is essential to our democratic system of government, and whereas a commitment to quality education requires involvement with and support of educators, parents, students, and the general public, and whereas educators should be accorded high public esteem reflecting the value that the community places on public education. Now, therefore, be it whereas the City of Socorro increase its commitment to involvement in and support of public education, and be it further, now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Socorro, Texas, Section 1, that this council and on behalf of the administration and citizens of Socorro, Texas, hereby during Public Schools Week, national education groups representing teachers, principals, superintendents, parents, civil rights and disability advocates, and religious organizations highlight the importance of our public schools and the positive difference they make in shaping the future of our country. Public schools are open to every child, regardless of ability, wealth, country of origin, or needs. And by supporting public school systems, we strengthen our country. Section 2, that this resolution shall become effective immediately upon its passage, assessed and approved on this third day of March 2022.
Ruben Reyes.
Yes.
Cesar Nevares.
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia.
Aye.
Rudy Cruz Jr.
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 34, discussion and action to adopt Resolution 685 recognizing El Charlatan, Ramenya y Taqueria for their featured at Texas Monthly's 21st edition.
Motion to approve.
Second.
So this item that I presented here today is in reference to El Charlatan, and for most of y'all who are not familiar with the restaurant, it is one of our new local restaurants here that's off of the historical Mission Trail, close to the Socorro Mission. And with us today, we have a gentleman who is from Socorro, a native of Socorro, and I believe a graduate of Socorro High School as well. It's not every day that you hear these success stories. His restaurant has been so successful with the help of his team and his family and the support from our community. So I felt that it was important that we advocate for our small businesses, and at the same time, I would like to recognize this restaurant today and present this to you all on behalf of the council this afternoon.
Would you like to stand, sir? Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Socorro that whereas the City of Socorro is celebrating and recognizing El Charlatan, Ramenya y Taqueria located in Socorro, Texas, housed inside Hacienda Podaca in Socorro's Art District Hub along the historic Mission Trail, has been featured at Texas Monthly's 21st edition of Where to Eat. And whereas the City of Socorro recognizes owner, executive chef Enrique Lozano and his excellent staff for offering an enticing menu, and whereas the City of Socorro is celebrating our local small businesses and contributions they make to our community, and whereas the City of Socorro encourages residents of our community and communities across the region and nation to support our small businesses, and whereas the City of Socorro will recognize the contributions to this community by honoring El Charlatan, Ramenya y Taqueria on March 3rd, 2022. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Council of the City of Socorro, Texas, Section 1, that this council and on behalf of the administration and citizens of Socorro, Texas, hereby recognize El Charlatan Ramen y Taqueria for their continuous involvement and presence in the community. Section 2, that this resolution shall be entered upon the permanent record of the city of Socorro, and a certified copy hereof shall be present to El Charlatan Ramen y Taqueria. Section 3, that this resolution shall become effective immediately upon its passage. Be it finally resolved that this resolution be submitted to the El Paso County State Legislative Delegation, other interested parties, and pertinent state of Texas elected officials. Passed and approved this 3rd day of March 2022.
Mayor,
Congratulations.
You have the
the
certificate.
where
Yes.
you're getting to the resolution.
One moment. There you go, this is for you. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz Jr.,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 28, discussion and action to approve the appointment of Al Borrego to the Historical Landmark Commission, Place 5.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Would you like to say something?
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Aye.
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
I'm sorry. Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Discussion and item number 35, discussion and action to approve the appointment of Juan Baquera to the Planning and Zoning.
Welcome, and
Place
thank you for
3.
choosing freeconferencecall.com. You're helping people around the world communicate for free. Please enter your app. If you are the host, press star now. Otherwise, please enter. Thank you. There are 2 participants in the conference. Please announce yourself.
Okay. Do you want me to read that again? Item number 35, discussion and action to approve the appointment of Juan Baquera to the Planning and Zoning, Place 3.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz Jr.,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 36, swearing in of newly appointed commissioners. Would these gentlemen please rise and step forward? Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I
I,
state your name,
Al Borrego,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I have not directly or indirectly paid,
that I am not directly or indirectly paid,
offered, promised to pay,
promised to pay,
contributed, or promised to contribute
contributed, or promised to contribute
any money or thing of value,
any money or thing of value,
or promised any public
or promised any public
or employment
or employment
as reward to secure my appointment
as reward to secure my appointment
or confirmation thereof,
or confirmation thereof,
Okay, please repeat after me. I state your name.
Al Borrego,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of the, and state your commission or board
of the Historic Landmark Commission
of the City of Socorro, Texas,
of the City of Socorro, Texas,
and will to the best of my ability
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution
the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and of this state.
and of this state.
Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Moving on to presentations. Item number 6, presentation by Vianney Esparza from the City of El Paso, Environmental Services.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Carl Rimkus. I'm an operations manager with the Environmental Services Department with the City of El Paso. And we're here to give an update on the services that we provide for vector control per our interlocal agreement with y'all. We have a brief presentation that Ms. Ginny Castañeda, our vector control supervisor, is going to give. And then when she's finished, I just wanted to go over the cost allocation process that you'll be seeing for the FY23 agreement coming up.
Good evening. So I'm gonna, excuse me, I'm a little nervous and I don't know why, because usually I don't mind making a fool of myself. So please bear with me. So as he stated, I am the code compliance supervisor for our vector program. We're gonna go over a couple of slides with you. Go ahead and leave it there. So based on our strategic plan, I'm gonna go through them pretty quickly, and then if anybody has any questions or wants me to stop, please let me know. We have, under our strategic goals, we fall under goals 2.8 and 8.9. Under 8.9, as it states, enhance vector control and environmental education to provide a safe and healthy environment. Next, please. So what is vector? I'm not sure if everybody knows what vector is or not. All you see is a pesky little mosquito and you're like, ugh, irritating. So vector is any living organism that transmits an infectious disease to humans, most commonly the mosquito. It's considered the most deadliest because it's so small, and the transmission of infectious diseases, i.e. Zika, chikungunya, West Nile, etc. Next one, please. So arbovirus, as I stated, arbovirus is an informal name used to refer to any virus that transports by an arthropod vector. So mosquitoes and ticks are considered arthropod vectors, and it goes into more detail, but what we're looking at is the transmittal from mosquito to human, and they're causing disease, please. Notable diseases, as I stated, you have malaria, dengue, West Nile chikungunya, Zika, and then the encephalitis. Next, please. Mosquito life cycle. So, just like in life, everybody, it's the female that bites. That's where you gotta be careful, because those are the ones that need the blood meal in order to lay eggs and produce. Okay, so as it states here, female seeks a mate, seeks a blood meal. Female locates standing water. So this is where we do their education over, make sure that they tip, they toss, they drain any type of standing water to not cause any breeding. Okay, larvae mature. So there's 4 life stages, or there's life cycle, basically is the egg stage, the larva stage, the pupa stage, and finally the adult stage. And finally, the entire cycle takes approximately 3 weeks for it to go through a full. Next, please. And that's me. I'm the supervisor for the treat and inspection group. We have 7 officers assigned to that, and then we also have a senior officer, which is Mr. Aaron Rodriguez. He's in charge of our field operations. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we had another, do you have the other spreadsheet that we sent over? Okay. So, you may be familiar with this cost allocation, and your interlocal agreements you have is with the city's Department of Health and the environmental services. The environmental services includes air quality and vector control. Currently, vector control is the only cost allocation that we are not doing per capita. So for FY23, we're going to be moving that cost allocation per capita for all the municipalities and for the county. So it will match up with the way you've been charged for your health services and your air quality. If you look at the FY20 section, I know there's a lot of data on here, but if you look at the FY20 section, there are two tables. The lower one is activity-based. And so what we've been doing for years is we've been charging each municipality for the level of activity we provided in your location the previous year. So the cost is always reflecting how frequently we were here last year. And that can vary widely based on the number of complaints we get, the type of season we have, just a lot of factors. So what was happening is the cost would fluctuate a lot. In FY21, Clint, their cost was going to be $73,000. And if you notice what they paid in FY20 was $28,000. So it jumped $50,000 in 1 year because we were there a lot the previous year. They couldn't even take our services because that was 10% of their total budget. So they dropped out. When they dropped out, that $73,000 now got allocated amongst everybody else, okay? Because we're reflecting what happened last year. So to avoid that, to try to provide more stability, we're gonna move to per capita for vector control next year. So the larger communities pay a little bit more, the smaller communities are gonna pay less. And that way we provide the level of service that's warranted in the area regardless of how many complaints or what the season is like at that time. We want to provide service equally to all, but of course the larger municipalities have a larger area to cover, and so generally require more of our services anyway, okay? So we send out in June, we start sending the letters out to let you know what the cost is going to be for the coming year, and then those agreements are generally signed in August and then effective September 1st. So we just wanted to give you a heads up that this is going to be the change, and if you had any questions, I'm available for that. If not, that's all we had to present. Yes.
Mr. Cruz?
So when you speak of the change in pricing, you base that off the size of communities, or is it the area of coverage?
So yeah, it's going to be based on population. So the way the cost is allocated is we take the total budget for our vector control program. If that's $1.3 million for the fiscal year, then what we do is we divide that up amongst each community. So the city pays over 80%. If you look at what we paid in FY22, the city's share was $858,000 of a total of $1.02 million, okay? And so what we've been doing with all the other components of the interlocal is they do it per capita, so per person based on your population. So if you're 5% of the population in the county, 5% of that 1 point whatever million would be the cost for vector control. And that's the cost model for health and air quality, so this is just gonna copy that. We don't want to penalize the community if we have to provide more service, and we don't want to let somebody off the hook just because we didn't have to go there a lot, because we want it to be stable for budgetary and planning purposes for both parties. So it doesn't make sense to have huge fluctuations from one year to the next, so this will stabilize it and make it consistent with the other parts of the agreement. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 7, presentation from Nationwide Representative Sarita Null on a 401A retirement plan.
Hi, my name is Sarita Null. I'm a retirement specialist with Nationwide. I currently service your 457B plan. I think you may have the presentation that I was going to show. If not, I can probably figure out how to share it here. Thank you, thank you. Madam Mayoress and Honorable Council people, thank you for allowing me to come and visit again with you regarding one of the products that we have that we can provide to your employees. This particular presentation is on something called a 401A. The 401A is a very, very customizable plan, so it's hard to have just kind of a stock PowerPoint presentation for it. I used the one that is entitled the Employer Discretionary Plan. But I will go throughout the presentation. I may use examples how it can also be used as a matching plan, as a bonus style plan, as a Social Security replacement. Those are the ways in which other client cities and entities of mine have used it. So before I go any further, I also want to clarify that I currently provide the 457B, which is an optional plan in most cases, although in your case, y'all use it as a primary pension style plan. And then this is more of a formal pension style plan, but it is highly customizable. So, and it can be included with a TMRS type setup, or it can stand separate. Okay. All right. Let me just a quick disclaimer here. I am not here to give advice. I'm not guaranteeing anything, and this is true of our products other than a couple of products within the lineup on our 457B that could also be in the 401A. They are generally no guaranteed products. And again, I am not here to give you advice on what to do. We are registered representatives. I am a financial advisor. I have a lot of background, but I'm not here to, my role is not to provide financial advice. Go ahead. So I'm going to talk about the 401A plan, but many of the things and elements that are in this presentation can also apply to your current 457B plan, because it just talks about the kind of services that we can provide. But a 401A plan is designed for public entities. It is a pension style plan, it can be designed as a pension or a pension replacement, but that's not always the case. Y'all, as the designers of the plan, have complete control over how you decide to use it if you decide to add it to the current setup. Okay, you can go ahead. I'm gonna keep adding in other things as we go through these slides. Again, it's hard to use a standard presentation when you're talking about something that is so customizable. But this is an employer-sponsored retirement plan, and again, designed for public employees. I'd like to clarify that if you work for a private entity, you might have access to a 401k plan. If you work for a nonprofit, oftentimes hospital districts and or school districts will use something called a 403b. But the 401a and a 457b, both of the plans I represent, are designed only for public employees. And there are unique benefits because of that. But it is a way to fund your retirement, or further, build a plan to fund your retirement. It is so customizable that you can design it where it may require contributions by the employer, the employee, or both. Contributions not only may grow tax deferred, they will grow tax deferred until they're withdrawn. Go ahead. So if you are using, well, and this slideshow is also designed more for the recipient, as if y'all already had this installed in the city. If the employee was putting money in, their taxable income would actually decrease. This same with the 457B. But what happens is monies are going in pre-tax, and so the earnings are growing tax deferred until they are withdrawn. One important distinction is with the 457B that you currently have, there is no age restriction on pulling money out. An employee just simply has to separate from service and they can take their money and run, even the monies that the city has put in on their behalf. So 457B is immediately owns or belongs to the employee. The money has been put in pre-tax, and then when they separate from service, they can take it all and go with no penalty. Okay, they do have to leave the city in order to take the money, but there is no penalty when they take it, even if they're young. The 401A, on the other hand, has a 59 and a half age rule, similar to a 401K or 403B. And then two, the taxes will be owed at that time. But if they took it before they were 59 and a half, they would pay a 10% penalty. The other distinction there is because this is so customizable, you can control if they have earned what we call vesting. So you can create a vesting schedule. And I'll give you some examples at the end of this slideshow. I'll give you some examples of my different entities that use these plans. Go ahead. The investment piece of it is very similar, if not exactly the same as the 457B. You can set it up exactly to match your 457B, or you can put in a unique set of investments and choices. We provide a guaranteed option in what we call the fixed account that is very similar to just a guaranteed savings account. And then there's going to be an array of mutual funds. And that could be an open architecture style program where you pick and choose what you would like to get or put into the plan, or you could just mirror what you currently have in your 457B. Of course, what's in your 457B could also be changed up if you decide to revisit the investments in that plan as well. But it's 90%, 99% mutual fund investing. The one thing we do have that's already in the 457B is the fixed account. And there's another product that we are now installing in a lot of our plans that is an indexed annuity. And that is something that could be in either or both of these plans. That's also a guaranteed product. Okay, thank you. Next. The personalized attention is generally through me. I live in Austin, Texas, but I do travel to El Paso County on a frequent basis, or well, we're not right now. I mean, I get out there a little bit but we're still not traveling all that much. They will release us to travel more in the near future, hopefully. But so as I said before to the council in a presentation a couple of weeks ago, I service El Paso County 911. The El Paso Central Appraisal District, the town of Anthony, and of course y'all. And so I am your main go-to person. And I think I've done a pretty good job. I mean, y'all may not have personally experienced it, but a pretty good job with video chats and phone calls and email, where I teach, educate, enroll, resolve issues, portfolio reviews. So you get me, but you also have a back office of people that are trained just like me. And so even if I'm not available, you can always set an appointment or make a phone call to someone in the back office. And then of course you can access your account 24/7 with a lot of web tools that we can talk about at another time. Thank you. So how the plan works basically is the differences in how you want to set it up. Again, it could be a discretionary plan where you decide, like you do with your 457B, where you put the 7% as a match. You could, and you would use the 401A to put the money, 401As are typically used for the employer's money. And that's why you're able to control it. Okay. So it will give you more control over the city's money, because the minute you put it in the 457B the way you do now, it immediately is owned by the employee. And so this would give you some more control. So that would be, but it's at your discretion as to when and how you put that money in. It can be based on budgetary challenges. I mean, so you can change it if the budget is tight, kind of like your vector control. You kind of want to predict these costs and spread them out. But you could do a discretionary, just whenever you could afford to throw some money in there for each employee. You could do a matching program into the, you could say to them, for example, if you'll put 5% in your 457B, we'll match it up to that amount also. I mean, in other words, match up to 5% or 6 or 7 or whatever that percentage is. I think this is a good time for me to go ahead and I do want to repeat that you have control in that you can set up a vesting schedule. So I'll give you some examples of how this is used in my experience. So I have a city that uses, they don't use TMRS, but they have a robust plan where they use this 401A plan and a 457B. Now, most of my other clients do also use TMRS or TCDRS with the 401A, but I do have a city that just uses the 401A and the 457. So how they set it up is you go to work there and they automatically will start putting 5% of the city's money into the 401A for that employee. They also will put another 5% into this 401A if the person will put 5% in their 457. So they are trying to incentivize the employees to save. So again, 5% of the city's money goes in for just a pension style deposit, and then another 5% or up to 5% goes in as a match to what the employee will put in. Now, if the employee puts in 3%, they're only going to get 3% match. If the employee puts in 7%, they're only going to still get the 5% match, or whatever you define, however you define it. Okay. Now, that particular plan does 5% and 5%. After the employee has been there, well, let me back up. If the employee leaves before 1 year, if the employee leaves within 1 year, they do not get the employer money that was put into the 401A on their behalf. They don't get the 5% that was the pension, and they also don't get the 5% that was the quote unquote match. All right. They get just the whatever that person had built up in their own 457B, because the 457B again is the employee's money. It's their account. They're free to take it and go. Now, that same employer, if a person stays 5 years, they will boost the pension to 7%. And at that time, they'll start putting automatically 7% into the employee's 401A. They're still matching just up to the 5% though on what the employee will put in the 457. So that's one example of an entity that uses this. Another example is a city that, well, sir, I have several cities who use the 401A just as a bonus. And again, it's so customizable. And I'm not the actual expert on the 401A. I'm not the one that would be designing the plan with you. I would bring in our consultants to help us design the plan. But so several entities, and this is across the United States, not just Texas and not just my clients, but I have a handful that use the 401A strictly to bonus their city manager. It's an incentive program. In fact, I've had 2 plans add the 401A in the last couple of years just because they were bringing in one case, they were bringing in a new city manager that was expecting it. And in another case, they were trying to retain a mature or veteran city manager. But it was a way to bonus, or it doesn't have to be the city manager. That's just an example in these cases. But it's a way to incentivize or bonus someone that is a highly compensated leader in the community. And that is allowed by law, believe it or not, because the rules for like 401ks are very different. You couldn't do that with a 401k. The pensions, the public plans are so much more unique than that. So if you ever have experience with a 401k or 403b, these rules are different. Another example would be, well, just anytime a community could afford to put in some extra dollars on your behalf. So you could say, okay, we're going to have this 401a open, and this year we're going to put an extra 3% in for everybody because we have enough money to do like a cost of living, but we're not going to put it in your paycheck. We're going to put it in this plan. But the next year you don't have to do that. You know, you could just do it when you could afford to do things like that. So, I mean, that, and I'm trying to think of another example. I have another example of an entity that is a very wealthy entity.
Ms. Rita?
Yeah, oh,
I
yes.
apologize. One of our council members had to step out and we have lost quorum.
Oh, goodness, okay. Do we, is this somebody, is this person gonna come back?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I'll stop for a minute, or however long I need to.
I apologize for that.
No worries at all.
Will the caller that just joined the meeting please identify yourself, ending in 9684.
Hello, this is Christian Chimchak with Socorro Village Project.
Thank you. Carlos, he's from CEA.
No, he is for item.
Thank you.
And what is his name?
Item 11. Hi. Huh? Hold on. I tried it last time.
Oh, yeah, I'll go.
No, I'm good, thank you.
I just messaged him.
Oh, okay. Oh, he's coming. I heard the door.
We're ready. Okay. Ms. Sarita?
Yes.
We now have a quorum. You can continue.
Okay, thank
Thank
you,
you.
thank you. And I will try to wrap this up. There's a whole lot in the rest of the
Yes.
presentation that I don't need to speak about because it's about the investment piece of it that is not really the distinction between these plans. But let me just repeat that y'all have, with the 401A, you have absolute control and discretion in design. You can go forward. And I will give a couple of more examples. So I don't even really want to use this specific example in this case, because I think the bottom line, you could go ahead and skip past that screen. And let's just stay right there for a minute, because I want to just kind of flesh out those examples, and I think that's more important. So again, so there's the one city that doesn't use TMRS, they use the 401A as the pension plan and then as a matching vehicle. There's, the other plans use as a bonus for important employees. Well, everybody's important. Another plan that I was about to talk about a minute ago was, so I have a very wealthy plan that has TCDRS, the 401A, and our 401A and our 457B. So some entities have the kind of money to have a robust retirement package. Most small cities, of course, and small counties do not have that privilege or that ability. Okay. The other last example I want to give is one of my entities uses they have TMRS, but they also have our 401A and our 457B. And they're not like a wealthy plan necessarily, but they do it for a very specific reason. So they do TMRS as the pension plan, which most cities do. And this is actually a quasi-city plan. But they use the 401A as a Social Security replacement. So they don't actually contribute to Social Security for the employees. You can go ahead and work through those. In fact, I would say fast forward through the slideshow to the information slide so that people can see. This other stuff is all about the investments, and we don't need to talk about that tonight. And these other slides, which you'll have access to, are also things that are true for the 457B, okay? So you can, those parts of the presentation are very the same. This slide here will be helpful because it's my contact information for any of you that have questions. But back to the Social Security example. So this entity doesn't use Social Security or doesn't take Social Security out of the checks, but they do put an equivalent contribution into a 401A to help replace that part of the employee's future income. So they create, in other words, a pension style account to support the client the employee down the road. So any questions before I feel like I've gone on too long about things, but I think the real examples and just the main thing to continue to reiterate that it's extremely flexible and customizable, and it gives you control over because the 457B doesn't give you much control. It's the employee's account. Now, real quickly, I will say in an ideal world, you would be able to do the TMRS and the 457B, or the TMRS, the 401A, and the 457B. Again, that 401A gives you a little bit of extra control and ability to do different things with the account. TMRS is very a black and white package. It's a very good, strong thing, but it's not going to be customizable to any large degree. But this would be. Okay. And I'm sorry. Any questions?
No questions, Ms. Snell. Thank you very much.
No questions?
No questions. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you having me, and I'll stay on for a bit in case something comes up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 8, update regarding MPO.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As promised, when I took the seat at the MPO, I was going to update the council and the residents of Socorro after each meeting. And so, to begin with my first part of this update is during these MPO meetings, we always attend. There's a representative from our city who sits at the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization with the county, and so we sit through these trainings. They provide trainings and updates. They let us know about what's going on within our county, within our city, and surrounding areas as far as transportation goes and the streets that are going to be built, if there's any widenings or anything of that nature. One of the topics of discussion during the training that we did attend that morning, there was a study done, and the study was in regards to the COVID and how us being a border city were affected by COVID. The study showed just a lot of information, a lot of statistics that were shared, and it spoke about the transportation as being a disease vector within binational communities, meaning border cities, and we experienced that through the entire southern border. And the study of border transportation was also done and it showed that the spread on the U.S.-Mexican border affected communities that are border cities similar to El Paso. And some of the statistics that I do want to share with you all, they amaze me because worldwide, there was 400 million cases and there were 5.7 million deaths. Here in the U.S. alone, there were 77 million cases and there were 915,000 deaths. Now, in our county alone, the El Paso County, there was 230,000 cases and there were 3,200 deaths. In Juarez, our neighbor city, there were 38,000 cases and there were 4,300 deaths. The information that was provided to us, if you really get to thinking about it, it makes no sense if we can vaccinate our community here when our sister communities that are traveling back and forth, crossing borders, are not vaccinated. Those are some of the topics of discussion. So the whole reason behind this is in the future, should anything like this happen to our community, the only real thing to do and the only thing that's going to help our communities is if we have a similar vaccine clinic set up going on both sides of the border. And I know our sister city and country, they don't have the resources that we have. It's very unfortunate. But I know that our community, alongside the U.S., has provided them with vaccines. It's very difficult for people across the border to receive the resources that we have. They did not become available to them very easily the way they were to us here in the U.S., hence the reason why we were affected so heavily here in the El Paso County. Those are some of the numbers that were shared with us. So yes, the COVID-19 did affect the border crossing significantly. Per day, you were seeing 80,000 crossings, where during COVID, 20,000 crossings. That affects our community because, yes, we are a large purchaser of goods. The transportation of those large trucks passing over the U.S. border does take a toll on our economic stability here. Another thing that we wanted to share with you tonight was like I spoke of earlier, was the mismatch between the spread control policies that need to be implemented. Again, we need to implement the same policies that we do here across the border. That's the only way we're going to be effective. Also, another update that I did want to share with you is the Border Trade Advisory Committee meeting. These are the members that represent El Paso, alongside our Commissioner Ileana Holguin. I know that she's been able to attend some of those meetings. She's an active member. One of the things that Mr. Calvo spoke about was the strong presence of the El Paso County. A lot of us ask ourselves as residents and members of our community, why is it that other cities in the state of Texas receive the funding that we don't get? Well, mainly is because they show a strong presence. South Texas is starting to show a strong presence. They're starting to see it from El Paso. So El Paso is making themselves visible at these meetings out in Austin, and I appreciate Commissioner Holguin for being the spokesperson for us out there. Thank you. Another update that I did want to share with you all is the amendment of 2045 MTP and the Destino 2024. This was a project from 2019, and the original cost of this project was a $54 million project. It was amended at our last meeting. It drove cost up to $10 million. Now, if you're not familiar with the actual route, this here is the Loop 375 widening project from Spur 601 to US 62/180. This was just a widening project, and the reason why the price was raised so significantly, again, you have the inflation, and then there was some utility issues that they had to work around, so it did drive cost up $10 million. Another update that I did want to share with you is the MPO office space lease. For you all to understand, the MPO meets at an office downtown. That doesn't necessarily mean that is the assigned MPO location. They will move throughout the county or the city to hold their meetings. Right now, they are looking over lease agreements that's going to be economically, in line with the budgeted allotment for lease of those offices. We did renew Mr. Calvo's contract here. He is on a 2-year term with a 1-year option. He is the executive director, and we did extend that employment agreement at last meeting. The I-10 widening, as you all may have heard on the news and social media and whatnot, it's still in the public hearing phase. This is in the RMS 2050 MTP. There's been 3 public comment meetings held. They were held on the 3rd of February, the 9th of February, and the 15th of February. This was a 30-day comment period. A lot of people have been asking for us to extend the public comment period, and that's what was discussed at the last meeting as well. So that way we are able to afford the residents of the county a lot more time to actually analyze what's going to happen in their city, and they can comment on that. So that was also discussed at our last meeting. Another thing that was discussed was the TxDOT MPO Safety Task Force. This is a task force that is statewide. Our chief of police may be familiar with it. This was started late last year with Ms. Laura Ryan, and the creation of this committee, it's pretty much made up of engineers, specialists who are well informed about the study and corridor studies and whatnot, alongside law enforcement officials. The way these committees are created, you want to at least have somebody that's going to be well represented in the committee there that understands engineering, education, and enforcement. And so that committee is also being developed as well. The regional mobility strategy, which is the RMS 2020 project status, I wanted to update the council and the residents as well on that. Mr. Landeros with the El Paso County did update us on this local government corporation. And what this does is it's going to enhance the connectivity with El Paso and other communities. So we are going to develop, we want to know what routes and what type of public transportation is viable and what makes sense in our communities and how we're going to transport our people from point A to point B and what makes sense, right? And so there was a meeting held on the 17th, and Horizon, Sanelli, Vinton, and the county are all involved. One of the things that was discussed there is they do want to re-engage with the city of Socorro, Anthony and Clint. Right now, we don't attend these meetings, or we haven't been as involved as we should. They want to re-engage our city. So at some point, somebody from this council or maybe the staff will have to go ahead and step in there to represent our city there. And other than that, that's pretty much it. That's my update for the MPO, if anyone has any questions.
No questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to consent agenda.
Motion to consent agenda?
Second.
Motion to approve consent agenda? Yes.
Consent agenda.
Thank you.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Mayor, may I make one comment?
Yes, Mr. Martinez?
I was waiting for Mr. Nevares to say something next. Just FYI, Mr. Nevares, I'm not wagging my finger at you, believe me, I just feel an obligation to say this out loud. If when you're muted, I know you're doing that as a courtesy so we don't get background noise, but when you're muted, the record will show you as absent. It's just a quirk in the law that says it's got to be video and audio. You're welcome to mute. I just want you to know the record will show you as absent. When you chime back in and you speak again, you'll be present again.
All right, I'll leave it on mute.
Just wanted you to know.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to our regular agenda, public hearing and ordinances. Item number 11, public hearing of an ordinance to allow the rezoning of Tract 9A, Block 14, Socorro Grant from R1 to R2, and variance requests to reduce the front setback and reduce parking requirements. It is now 7:03 p.m. Public hearing is open.
Mayor, we have two speakers for this item. Miriam Cruz.
Ms. Cruz?
She's unmuted.
Yes, I just got unmuted. Thank you, Ms. Navarro. I wanted to make two comments. The first one is, I have repeatedly requested that the presentation be done before public comment so that the public, since it's open and anyone can walk up to the mic to speak, be given the opportunity to get a little bit more information in regards to the presentation before speaking. And if y'all, and I've repeated that for years, and if y'all aren't going to do that, I would, I guess, appreciate a response that none of you agree with that idea and you're not going to do it. Because to me, it makes sense that there should be some basic information provided to the constituents before asking them to speak on something. Because usually, if they are there because they got a letter in the mail, usually that letter is a little bit limited, and obviously more information is provided here today. So I'm just going to reiterate it one more time, that I hope that you guys can think about that and maybe change the process. The second comment is that I am speaking as a constituent and with no other title. I understand that the plan is to approve also, or at least staff is recommending approval of a variance setback, and I just want to put it out there, right? We're talking about property in front of a very busy elementary school. So I hope that y'all keep that in mind with this presentation. I understand that there is already some area space in front of these apartments and in front of the school, but obviously the space sometimes does get used as parking or whatnot, and so I foresee an issue potentially, unfortunately, a safety issue, because even though these plans they're very nice, very welcome to our city. Thank you for bringing this. But my concern would be for safety in regards to agreeing to the variance that they are requesting in the front setback that faces the elementary schools on the other side of Buford. That's it. Thank you.
Kristen Simsek?
Is that the one that called in? Yes, sir. Oh, okay. Just check. Unmuted. I told them.
Kristen Simsek?
Hello, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, first, thanks for your consideration. I'm pulling up the plans right now. I just want to take a look at them to see. I was hoping the civil engineer would be on here and he could explain why the setback is needed and what possible implications that would have. I don't think that we're needing very much. And I don't believe the idea is to impede the progress of any pedestrian walkways. So I'm pretty sure we have that in mind to accommodate that. But unfortunately, I'm not in an immediate position to be able to answer that question. Sorry, I'm just checking the plans really quick here and trying to figure out. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, so it appears that there is a setback line that goes well into the property line, I guess, and pieces of the parking lot are there. So I think what's actually going to go into that area, there's going to be, it's going to be well inside of the existing fence that's there. So it's a wooden fence that's currently there. So the things that we're actually going to be within the setback but still behind the fence are a barbecue and a playground and a portion of the parking lot. But anyway, yeah, and I don't think it's not gonna impede on what is existing at this now. So even though the setback's being moved, it's not gonna come out into the street anymore or alter the walkways, the pedestrian walkways in any way. It's just gonna build a little bit more stuff, the playground, et cetera, on the existing dirt that's already there, that's within the property line. Yeah, in short, I think that, I wouldn't look for it to be, having an effect on anybody in the neighborhood in a negative way.
Mayor, those were all our speakers.
Thank you. It is now 7:09 p.m. Public hearing is now closed. Item number 12, second reading and adoption of an ordinance to allow the rezoning of Tract 9A, Block 14, Socorro Grant from R1 to R2, and variance request to reduce the front setback and reduce parking requirements.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Carlos Gainal with Planning and Zoning. Happy to be with you here this evening. So this is obviously our first item. You have already seen this item in the past as a resolution was given to this applicant back in January. Mr. Cruz, if you remember, it's the apartment complex that they're going to be renovating, and there was discussion between this city council led by Mr. Cruz and Mr. Garcia to ensure that the new playground has all disabilities and is accessible to the public. So this is why it's going to sound familiar to you, but this is the actual rezoning that we had been discussing back in January. And so the request is to approve the rezoning from R1 to R2. And then there, at the time that we published or sent the agenda item for council consideration, they needed two variances, the setback, which I will address, and then the parking reduction. After, even before P&Z and so subsequent to us putting the agenda item on for your consideration, it was determined that they don't really need the parking reduction, and I'll tell you why. But so the item for you this evening is a rezoning, and then the variance on the setback, and again, I'll walk you through those two items in just a second. So again, as part of the background, the property is zone R1, and you may be asking yourself, there's apartments there now, and as you know, their apartments are not allowed in R1, and that is because it's been grandfathered. The development was built in 1980, and as they're intending now to renovate the apartments, they have to bring it up to code, right? They're going to be adding new buildings, they're going to be renovating the apartments, and so it can't continue to be grandfathered without it having to be rezoned, and so that is why it's in front of you. The planning and zoning staff is recommending approval, and I am asking you all to consider a condition. So there was discussion about the setback, and the condition is that there is a decorative fence that is built around the playground so that kids don't run into the street. But in all consideration, quite frankly, the setback is logical and should be granted. And again, I'll walk you through that as well. And then P&Z did vote to approve, I believe, back in February 3rd, so about a month ago. Here's the location map, and so it's on Buford, just south of Alameda, as Horizon Boulevard turns into Buford. As the zoning map shows, it is zone R1. There are other R1s around here, but when you consider that it's going to be switched to R2, again, the apartments are already there, and apartments next to single-family homes are compatible land uses when it comes to considering the zoning district. Here are just some images of the property. I think many are familiar with it. Here's the aerial. Here's another look at the aerial, just a greater view. And then public notification was sent to, as required by state law, to homes within 200 linear feet of this property. And as of today, we have received no phone calls, emails, opposition, inquiries to the rezoning. Here is a site plan, and as was mentioned, so already, as you know, there's already existing structures there. What the applicant, next slide please. What the applicant is proposing is there are currently 19 existing buildings with 50 units. They're going to be adding 2 new buildings, but only adding 2 new units. They're going to be adding, I believe, a community room, office space, and then in addition to that, renovating all 50 other units, bringing them up to code, beautifying them, increasing the standards of those units, and then the playground and additional parking. So it's a great development, right? These are the sorts of things that you want to see in your community. People start reinvesting money in existing structures. These are 52 units that you don't have to build somewhere else, but that are being renovated for the tenants that are currently there now. And as I mentioned, the parking requirement does meet it. It's 1.5 parking spaces per unit, not 2, as was previously calculated. And so they're okay on the parking. So there's no consideration for the parking variance. Here's the front setback, and I'll just walk you through this again. This is the red line shows where the 55-foot setback as is required by the code. And then the next slide, please. So I'm sorry, can you go back? So this shows it as the proposed site plan, right, with the proposed playground, and where you could see the encroachment of the playground and some parking spaces. Next slide. But the way that we considered this, again, is that you have Buford Road. You already have about 25 feet of additional, not right away, but space. It's like parking space. I'm not sure if it's dedicated through an easement, but between the street and the property line, you already have about 25, 30 feet. And then in addition to that, you're going to have about 20 feet, 25, 27 feet where the playground would begin. And so again, that was our consideration, to consider that the front setback would be taken care of. In addition to the space, we are asking for the condition that, again, because you do have a playground, and it is relatively close to the street, that there is that as part of your motion that you consider putting the condition that they put a decorative not wrought iron, but metal wall that looks, metal fence that looks nice, that's decorative, that way kids and families are enclosed within that structure. And my understanding is when this went to the P&Z and in speaking with the applicant, their engineer, they were okay with the condition. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, the summary of the request: approve a rezoning request from R1 to R2 to allow apartments. The legal nonconformity would go away, and then approve the variance for the front setback reduction.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Sorry.
With all the requests?
With all the requests on the summary.
The request without the parking requirement and the metal fencing.
So Ms. Navarro, no parking requirement, but it would,
Right.
yes, ma'am. So it would be the motion should include allowing the setback with a condition to provide a decorative fencing around the perimeter.
playground.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, motion to approve with no setback and the condition of the fencing
Yes, sir.
area. Second.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 13, public hearing of an ordinance to allow the rezoning of lots 1 and 2, Stockyard subdivision from C2 and M2 to ICMUD, and variance request to reduce the front setback and reduce parking requirements. It is now 7:17 p.m. Public hearing is open.
Mayor, we have a speaker for this public hearing, Miriam Cruz.
Thank you, Ms. Navarro. Again, I am speaking simply as a constituent. And just also, by the way, I also signed up to speak on item 13, but I'm not going to ask y'all to open it back up because obviously council didn't have any questions. So I don't know, maybe you guys didn't. Anyway, so on this item, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. This obviously is connected to the gateway. And if any of you all who are residents know that there are many accidents that happen on this, close to this intersection along Gateway and Alyssa, there's many accidents that I've seen personally happen here, mostly because you have the off-coming traffic from I-10 that's exiting onto the Gateway, directly coming towards where people are trying to get onto the Gateway. Obviously now also during peak hours, there's a lot of traffic during that time and there's a lot of backup. This distribution center, the plans that were presented look fantastic, right? They look top notch, top dollar, but I do want the council to consider future potential expansion, future issues, and maybe ask some questions because, you know, just because it looks nice doesn't mean that we just want to approve things. We want to be thinking things through. And so there is a deceleration to turn into Alyssa, but there is no access lane or acceleration lane to get onto the gate. I think that is something that is really important to consider, especially if you're talking about 18-wheelers at a distribution center that are going to be trying to get onto the gateway. And obviously everyone knows an 18-wheeler takes a while to speed up. The other concern is that potentially, just like it is being used now, Stockyard into the residential area towards the back that turns into the county, that moves towards North Moon, currently is already being utilized, even though it shouldn't, by 18-wheelers as a shortcut to get onto the gateway. So to try and avoid traffic on Horizon and Stockyard, and to avoid just the mess that happens on Alyssa and the gateway, a lot of 18-wheelers and a lot of drivers go towards down Stockyard and onto North Moon to get onto the gateway. And so again, this is a residential area that is being already used by 18-wheelers that shouldn't be. And so I can't imagine that the distribution center would be helpful to that unless we ask the owners to be part of that, of maybe a condition for their tenants. And, oh, the other thing I wanted to mention was that Alyssa Road doesn't seem like the most road capable to have that many 18-wheelers on it. Obviously, there are many 18-wheelers that already drive on it, but we're talking about a distribution center, and so I don't believe that there are any plans to expand Alyssa, and I would think that we would want to make that part of this great, grand, nice-looking project, if in fact y'all are going to approve. And the last thing would be the variance that is being requested in regards to the setbacks in the front or the north along Gateway. It's also something that I think you should think about before approving. That's it. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
So we're under public hearing. Okay.
Yes, yes, ma'am. My name's Will Stacy with Bryant Stacy Group. We're the applicant for this project, and we look forward, hopefully, to working with the City of Socorro. We're excited about it. There's a lot of growth, as you know. You're experiencing it right now. That's happening here, and we hope to be a part of it. We've got what we think is a great plan for the site. We've taken into account some of our concerns. We've had a traffic impact analysis done, and the recommendation of that analysis was approval of the project. It has a minimal impact on surrounding traffic. And I'm here to answer any other questions, of course, that you may have. And hopefully we can work together on a project in the near future.
Thank you. It is now 7:22. Public hearing is closed. Item number 14, second reading and adoption of an ordinance to allow the rezoning of lots 1 and 2, Stockyard subdivision from C2 and M2 to IC, MUD, and variance request to reduce the front setback and reduce parking requirements.
Mayor and Council, once again, Carlos Gainat, Planning and Zoning. So this is another rezoning with a couple of variances. Again, this one does have the front setback and has the parking reduction, and I'm going to walk you through both. As was stated by the mayor, so this is a rezoning from, there's two parcels. The biggest parcel is zone C2. The smaller parcel is zone M2. When the applicant approached the City of Socorro about two or 3 months back, they were asking for, obviously, the distribution warehouse. The City of Socorro no longer allows rezonings to M1 or M2. And so the reason that the next sort of logical zoning district is the industrial commercial mixed-use district. The backup that we provided to you is the full report that was given to us by the applicant, right? So the ICMUD requires a lot more extensive data and a lot more extensive analysis than you would have in a typical rezoning. And so the packet that's in front of you, or as part of the backup, is what the applicant requested. The site plan is what they would be tied to having to develop if it's approved. They could come back with some minor modifications, but essentially what they're asking is the rezoning to the ICMUD. And so again, size is about 18 acres. The proposed land use, currently the site is vacant. The proposed land use is an industrial distribution facility. And then, as I mentioned, there's variances for the front setback and parking reduction. Planning and Zoning Department is recommending approval, as did the P&Z, I believe, unanimously on March 1st, 2022, this past Tuesday. The location map is here, so fronting I-10, and the other two streets are Alyssa and Stockyard, about 18 acres in size. Here's the rezoning. So the C2 and the M2, as you could see, so those two parcels would be rezoned to ICMUD. And as you all know, this is an area of Socorro that lends itself for M1s, M2s, ICMUDs, C2s, right? Heavy commercial, heavy industrial. And so that is why we base our recommendation that there already are existing land uses and existing zoning districts within that area that are compatible to the request. Here's the image of the property. Here's the aerial. Another view of the aerial, and then as required by state law, Notices were sent out to adjacent property owners, and as of today, we have received no comments, no feedback, no requests for clarification, no public comment. The site plan, the next slide shows the site plan. So it's about a 255,000 square foot building. It has plenty of parking, and I'll walk you through the parking reduction in just a second. And then it has a over 2 acres, 3 acres size pond, which is a pretty considerable pond for that development. And as was mentioned by the applicant, there was a traffic impact analysis done. So I'm going to walk you through that, right? It's important that we analyze the traffic, especially given that there's going to be a considerable amount of heavy traffic going through this. The first slide, which is taken directly from the TIA supplied by the applicant, shows just for your reference, right? When we talk about traffic impacts or congestion, we talk about level of service. So if a street or an intersection has a level of service A, that means it's great, right? That means it's good, traffic's flowing pretty good, there's no issues. If it has an F, it means it's terrible. It means you need to mitigate traffic flow. And so, and then there's the different criteria from A, B, C, D, E, and F, right? So it goes from great to worst. And so the next slide shows the AM peak hours of that this development would have on that intersection. And so as you see, on the northbound going out into Gateway from Melissa, you do have a level of service D. On the other aspects of the development, there's 2 driveways, and then on the intersection of Alyssa and Stockyard, it's all level A, right? So again, to the applicant's point, there's no real traffic mitigation that needs to happen. This is for the AM peak hours, and then in the afternoon peak hours, next slide, please. It drops a little bit to E, but again, the impact is still A. And if you consider that it is I-10, it is Gateway, it is a frontage road, you are going to have that type of traffic concerns given again the nature of the street and the nature of the development. But the next slide. And so as was recommended by the TIA, I won't read this into the record, but essentially what it says, all unsignaled approaches are projected to operate at an acceptable level of service for 2023, which is the year that the development would come online. And then again, with some exception that turn from Alyssa to Gateway does have level of service E, but there's no real mitigation that needs to happen. The recommendation from the TIA at the bottom is that traffic impacts to the surrounding roadway are minimal and approval is recommended. Now, speaking about the parking reduction, so they are asking for a parking reduction that is considerably, so let me rephrase this. So the way that our code is currently written, for every 500 square feet of leasable net area, it requires 1 parking space, right? So when you divide 500 by 255,000, our code would require them to have 510 parking spaces. I bring this to your attention, and I circled that the last time that we reviewed our parking minimums and parking requirements was back in 2010. The very first time I believe that this was all written was back in 1989. And so many things have happened, right? The economy is not the same. People aren't driving to Targets and Walmarts as much as they used to. In this case, we also compared it, or the applicant compared it to the requirements from Houston and El Paso. And it is considerably less. So again, if you take the 255,000 square foot proposed building divided by 500, the city of Socorro would require 510 parking spaces. What the applicant is saying, next slide, is that and I again just highlighted it from the report, the number of parking spaces we are requesting exceeds the number of prospective tenants will require. So they are already saying, listen, even if you require us to provide 510, we don't need 510, right? What we are providing will accommodate our employers and the people that would be visiting that site. They also include, as I stated at the bottom, 91 trailer parking spaces. So the total amount of parking that they would be providing is 358 parking spaces. And then next slide. This shows what El Paso would require and what Houston would require. So for the same Square footage, Houston would require 95 spaces, the city of El Paso would require 75 spaces, right? All this to say is that we probably should be reviewing our parking minimums as we amend the code in the future, only because sometimes we tend to overpark, not only for industrial warehousing, right, but for commercial and restaurants. But anyhow, so that is how we came to the conclusion that the parking reduction makes sense. And then again, the variance for the setback, so similarly to the one that you just saw, there's 80 feet of property, of easement between the gateway and the beginning of their property. So if you consider, next slide, if you consider the 80 feet that are currently there, that's not part of their property, it's an easement, perhaps for future expansion in 2040 or 2050, and then the 35 feet that they are providing, you essentially have a setback of about 115 feet. And so again, all these things put together, the size of the building, the TIA, the setback request, the parking, is what we base our recommendation on. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Next slide. Just shows the summary of the request.
Mr. Cruz?
Mr. Gainar, did all members of the P&Z vote yes?
I believe they all voted yes, yes.
Okay, given the traffic impact analysis, does P&Z, are they provided this information as well before making their final?
Mr. Cruz, so the presentation is identical to what you saw today, with the exception of putting the information that the P&Z voted for.
For the most part, P&Z makes a decision based off of all the information that was presented to us today?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good deal. If there are any concerns about the residential areas being affected, there is a form that our residents can visit online. It's the NT MP form, and
Yes.
that's the neighborhood traffic calming request. That's on
Correct.
the P&Z portion of our city website. So that's just I'm just throwing it out there. That's accessible to all our residents if that's ever a concern. But that's all I wanted to know, if all members of P&Z voted yes on this.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion?
Got a comment.
Mr. Reyes?
I got a question, comment.
Yes, Mr. Reyes.
As far as having to do any special accommodations to the Sparks Arroyo, it's gonna be very close to their area, towards the back stockyard. The city's not gonna have to go back later on and spend all this money fixing their rock wall, whatever they're gonna put. Everything should.
Yes, sir. So the pond that is on the site plan is totally 100% private. They're maintaining it. It's their pond. It's not like in other developments when sometimes in mostly neighborhood or residential, those ponds are given to the city, right, once it's completed. This one is going to be the applicant's. So and again, the size of the pond, which is considerably large, almost 3 acres, is to capture all of the runoff from their development.
No, but I'm talking about on the back between their side and stockyard.
Yes, sir.
We shouldn't have any issues with that, right?
No, sir. I mean, it's, again, it's its own pond. It's containing its own water. It's going to have its own rock wall. None of the water from this development will go to the adjacent public pond. Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Go ahead, Ms. Velázquez.
No.
Okay, I just wanted to note that the Sparks Arroyo, at one point, we were looking into some of that property in order for that water that comes down from the north of I-10 to collect it, because it channels through that area, and then it goes into our onion field
Yes, ma'am.
basin. Correct,
And-
and I think that's what Mr. Reyes is asking. However, my understanding is that the El Paso County is also doing improvements up north
Yes, ma'am.
that might mitigate our collection of water.
Correct. Mr. Reyes, sorry I misunderstood the question. And then I believe the applicant has already started conversations with Dannenbaum, who is the city's engineer on this. So I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add on that, but you all have started those processes.
Sure, of course.
The question, I don't want for you to build your ponding area, nice rock wall and everything, and then we get out of rain, Sparks Arroyo comes over and takes your rock wall. That was
And thank you. And so we've already talked with the engineer for the drainage district, and our pond is separate. You're right, there is a collection area, but from the plans that we've seen, that is separate from our tract. It's just to the west of us where they are having a collection point, but we're separate from that. So our pond is going to be for our project, but it's going to collect everything that we drained will go into our pond and will be separate from what the drainage district is doing. And we'll ensure, when we're going to work with them, obviously, as they're improving it now, to make sure that what we do is compatible with what they have going on.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions?
We need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And we have a speaker for this item, Miriam Cruz. Ms. Cruz?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Navarro. I was waiting to be unmuted, sorry. So I guess the only thing that I would mention, and actually I've been meaning to mention this in regards to traffic impact analysis or TIAs, is that currently I believe that still some offices here locally, large offices, are still barely getting back into the swing of things, you know, post-pandemic or, you know, going back into the pandemic, whatever. And so I wonder, if anything, how is that affecting the traffic analysis that we're doing right now, when we can't expect that everyone that is going to be driving in the next couple of years is actually driving right now to and from work, to and from their house. And so I wonder what, if anything, is being considered when these analyses are being done, and what, if anything, you know, can mitigate that aspect of a TIA. The parking reduction, obviously, that doesn't seem like an issue at all, but I will stand by my comment in regards to the variance, because we might just be setting ourselves up, even if it is 2040, 2050.
Ms. Cruz, your time is up. Ruben Reyes?
Yes.
Cesar Nevares?
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia?
Aye.
Rudy Cruz?
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 15, second reading and adoption of an ordinance approving the rezoning of Lot 2, Block 1, Valle Sereno, Tract 25A, Block 15, Socorro Grant, Tracts 25B3, Block 15, Socorro Grant, Tract 25A, 1A, Block 15, Socorro Grant, Socorro, Texas, from R1 Single Family Residential to R2 Medium Density Residential, and a variance of the front yard setback to allow for a 10-foot setback, and a variance of the rear yard setback to allow for a 15-foot setback with conditions to limit the density to single-family homes and provide 20-foot driveways.
Mayor and Council, good evening again. Carlos Gainad. I am happy to walk you through that very long presentation I gave you about a month ago, or just give you the latest update. It's entirely up to you.
Latest update.
What was the question?
Latest update.
Yes, latest update. Great. So can we take the slide to move forward, please, on the slides? So the latest update is that it's our understanding that the applicant, Mr. Escobar, had met with the resident that had raised the issue of the development in the back. What we have learned, I believe it was Friday, that we received a revised site plan showing, next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Otro. Uno más. So this is the site plan is exactly the same. All the lots are the same. The only consideration now that the applicant is requesting is that there is a 30-foot driveway that I believe leads to the backyard of the gentleman that was here. That is the one item that the applicant has brought back. The other items, as was presented to you a month ago, are all the same. And I believe that they've come to an agreement based on the request of having a driveway to the backyard.
Mr. Garcia?
So our constituent got a 30-foot driveway, and that changed the trajectory of the housing, of the decision for our citizens of that area.
So, Mr.
Or-
Garcia,
Yes.
yes, go ahead, please.
No, sir. I went and met with the neighbors or whatever you want, the people there, and I'm sorry, I'm tired today. Mayor and council, there was a long conversation. I think I stayed there about an hour. There were a lot of things that were not understood about the project that we explained.
Right.
And during the conversation, we noticed that we were leaving that lot landlocked. And because of the way the pond is, we have that triangle. And I didn't see a point in doing that, so I suggested, why don't we put a driveway there?
You recommended this.
Because there was gonna be a landlocked. So we show it because it's the only change that was done to the presentation last time. But everything through our conversations, as far as I understand, Mr. Lee is the representative, that we're in agreement now that it'll be a nice subdivision.
Mr. Cruz?
So the recommendation for the 30-foot driveway was not in your initial plan because of the ponding. Now you see that the 30-foot driveway, which is a private driveway to someone's backyard.
Since I didn't notice that we were landlocking a property, we never put it on there.
But that makes no sense because whenever we do infill, you landlock the surrounding properties.
I can't understand.
He's asking that your explanation might not make sense because when you do infill, you sort of review those things. The landlocking of the property.
Okay, let me explain about that one property. That one property is a very big property that has a house in the front and then a big piece of land. So if I build the subdivision and somebody eventually wants to do something with the back property, they would have to tear part of the house down in order to access it. So right now, it's one single property. So if we don't leave a gate there, then it might cause a problem in the future, that there's no point, because it's a big piece of property.
Well, to be honest, I voted nay on this project because of the residents' concern. And I stuck to my word with the residents that I represent in that area. And I'm gonna vote nay again, but I'll listen to you all. The thing is that what it seems like and what we are going to do tonight, should this council agree to this 30-foot driveway, and I understand the concept of landlocking that second property behind your current home address. The thing is that we're going to set precedents for all residents here to create or I don't want to use the term cut deals. I don't want to use that term, but it almost seems as if we're able to sit with a developer and we can let them know about our concerns and then the plans can change to our liking, then we are good with the development. But I just want to make sure that the decisions that are made tonight are in the best interest of not just for one individual, but all of the individuals. I don't want to deviate from the previous plan, but I'm here to listen to you all and hear you out.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. It's not that we agreed to a deal for my property, because even if he puts the fence up and I divide that property and I sell it later, that's probably the only way into the property later on. So it would be cutting the fence later, breaking the rock wall and entering. So if he's gonna do that, you know, I'm not saying that I'm gonna break up my lot and sell it later, but it's just in the future, whoever decides to get it, if I decide to do that later on. What we agreed on was for the R2 with the variances. My concern is that council stays with those variances and that the property becomes only an R2 single resident family The concern of everybody there was that they're not apartments, that they're not townhomes, that they're not duplexes, triplexes, that increases the traffic flow into that area. I noticed these last 2 days when they closed the Socorro Road for those utility poles and traffic was being diverted up Buford. Imagine an apartment complex going back there now with all that traffic, because nobody could go down Socorro Road, so everybody's coming up Buford, up to Rio Vista, up to Haynes, all the way up to Alameda. Traffic was a mess the last 2 days. Took me 10 minutes to get out of my house, and normally crazy. So it's like Mr. Escobar told me also, he goes, if I don't develop here, you're gonna get an R1 and somebody else is gonna do whatever they want, okay? The reason why I agreed to the plan the way it was too, I have no neighbors then with that ponding area. He didn't change the plan, that plan's already the way it was. That ponding area is the adjacent of my whole property, that his development is gonna be against mine. If he doesn't develop and somebody else comes in, they can put houses there now, and now I have 10 neighbors against that backside of my property. Right now, there's no neighbors with that ponding area. Like I said, he didn't change the plan. That plan's the same. If he doesn't make that little driveway, and I sell that property later on, I'm just making it easier if I do sell that property, the back lot, for somebody to develop on it. If not, I mean, they're gonna break the wall down anyway at that point. Because that's the only way in. There's no other. The other property next to me it goes all the way to my property, and they would have to use my driveway then if I wanted to sell that property in the back. That's all it is. It's just making a fence, basically, a gate for that rock wall. If he doesn't do it, he doesn't do it. I mean, that's fine too. Like I said, if I sell it later on, somebody else is gonna I'm just making it easier for later on for somebody else. And I don't benefit from a fence there or not. It doesn't matter.
Mr. Garcia, did you have a question?
I share the same motion as Mr. Cruz. That it looks a little, I don't like it in a sense, sir, with all due respect.
I understand.
And if we do set precedents, it's gonna look bad on everybody. We can be asking for parks, we can be asking for gates. So I'm gonna make the motion to approve with original plans.
Okay.
And that is for transparency, that is for our citizens to know exactly what we're doing here. If you can follow our rules, we're gonna follow the rules as well. With all due respect, thank you.
And I would second that.
Mr. Reyes, you
I
have
got a
question?
request to Mr. Escobar. Since you're already building this nice subdivision, can you extend the little piece, what is it, Urunaga Court, all the way to Celedon Circle, just to all the way to that side, the pavement?
Okay, I'm lost.
I think he's asking about the cul-de-sac at the end.
It's in the entrance,
Can you go back, the one on the right side, sir?
on the left side, where you stop the subdivision and it transitions to the old street. Right there, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Can you just extend new pavement all the way to?
There is pavement.
I understand, but can you extend it new?
I will match it. I can't build outside my subdivision.
Okay.
Now, let me tell you, we regularly visit with the city and show them areas that are not up to standard, and I can give you names and places and streets right now, and we go ahead and do them once the equipment is there, because it's insignificant the cost once everything is being done, and the benefit to the city is great. And I'll give you an example. When we redid East Lake Unit 1, we paved Old Waco up to the church.
Right.
And when we did Unit 2, we actually connected to Grijalva Estates. We actually built a road with curbs because the past subdivision didn't have that. So if we see something like that, we usually throw it in.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Mr. Cruz?
Mr. Gallinat? For the formality of our ordinances, does the revised general plan warrant a public hearing, a comment, or this is something that needs action now because the revised general plans are not the original plans that were presented to this council last meeting?
Yes, sir. So I think if you wanted to vote for the new plan, and maybe this is where Mr. Martinez might chime in, I think the change is so insignificant that it wouldn't warrant public hearing because everything else is the same, right? The layout's the same, the number of houses are the same. It's that one minor item that.
Well, in a sense, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
It is significant because the first time this was presented to us, the main concern was the amount of homes being built and the traffic that was going to be going through the streets. Now that what's being presented to this council today is now I'm landlocking my back property, and if I want to sell it in the future, I need an access out so that I don't have to break down or cut a road through my primary house.
Yes, sir.
For this person to access it should it be sold in the future. That was never presented to this council up until today. So now that raises confusion amongst this table as to what the initial concern was. Was it the amount of homes being built that transitioned from R1 to R2, or the traffic? Now it's multiple concerns.
Yes, sir.
But now it seems that now I can access my backyard another way. I'm good with the plan.
Yes, sir, but just to be clear, the concerns that you are talking about were never the concerns that staff raised, right? We presented the case, we presented the. Yeah, that's exactly right. I can't speak for the constituents, sir, but when we presented the plan, our recommendation was to approve, if you remember, right? And we walked you through the mitigating of the setback and why this makes sense with infill. And so I can't speak for the residents, Mr. Cruz, but just what your original question, right, of looking at it from the site plan, it's 99.9% the same site plan, right? So that's what I'm looking at it. I can't, again, I was in purview to the discussion between Mr. Escobar and the residents.
But I wasn't. I want to make a very, very, very clear clarification to you, Mr. Cruz. I was never asked for anything, okay? I volunteered it. I even drew it, because when I saw what was there, I thought I was going to landlock a piece that I can fix. And and this is right there. I told them, I will give you the driveway. You have to build your own gate. Did I not say that? Okay, so I did not volunteer. There was no pro quo. It was something that I saw exactly like you're asking me right now. If I can improve the street when I do the connection, will I do it? Of course I'll do it, because I got too many interests in Socorro not to help out wherever I see it. But the way you're framing it is like I did something and I'm getting something in return, and that's not the case. I explained my subdivision. I explained that the person, if somebody comes in, the only difference is 2 homes. This way they know exactly what they're getting. They want to make sure that you put it that it's single family, not apartments, okay? So I want to make clear that there was nothing implied, given, or taken. It is my recommendation, because in the future, that'll be good for the city. That is all.
Mr. Olarte?
And I just kind of wanted to add something to that, is that I don't think that's what's being brought, is we received a petition that they didn't want to grant the variance because they did not want 17 homes. That's what was on the table, right? You all were instructed to go out and talk amongst yourself to make sure you come to an agreement for the 17 homes. And I think that's where the confusion is, and I think they're worried about the transparency issue. I think there's a motion on the table to approve the original plan that was through the public hearing. If that motion doesn't pass, and then we would ask Jim, would we have to have another public hearing based on the changes? But I think that's the real question, is that the petition never, it stated they didn't want 17 homes.
Mayor,
They
may I?
wanted to remain, they wanted the zoning to stay the same, and the zoning would only allow 14. We asked for a variance because of the lot sizes, in order for you to fit the 17 homes. The petition was that they did not want the rezoning. right? That was, and I think that it's important for the public to know and clarify that. I don't think anyone was, but they were instructed to go out and talk amongst themselves and come back. I think the confusion here is that what the petition stated, that obviously, I guess, approved itself by having this conversation, right? Because now there's no concern that we know from Mr. Limas. We haven't heard from the 60 other constituents that signed that petition.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor. Jim Martinez, City Attorney. A question for Carlos. Carlos, do I have the history correct? At the time of the public hearing, what had been published and the plan that was available was the original one that is the subject of the motion tonight, yes?
So Jim, if there's a couple of things, so the answer to your question is what was published from the very beginning, going back to 2 weeks before P&Z, and then 2 weeks before City Council was the original site plan. But also to be clear, and I think you'll understand this, is that the site plan is technically conceptual.
Right.
So, right, that's why you put the conditions to make sure that you're limiting the density. So there's nothing legally, in my estimation, Jim, tying the site plan to council action.
Right. No, I agree with that. I mean, I get that distinction. I just want to make sure the original plan that is obviously the subject of the motion.
Yes, sir.
That was what was before, what was operative at the time of the public hearing. Yes.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, Mayor, and Carlos makes a good point, and I know I've said that the council has heard me say this before. I know we're all kind of our eyes are drawn to the diagram, and we see it, and we focus on that. It's the visual side of your brain where the neurons fire. But the item before council is a rezoning. It's just a rezoning. This isn't a plat. It's not a preliminary plat. It's not a final plat. It's a rezoning, and I think you have to address that on the merits. Now, whether or not there's an easement, whether or not there's something that would prevent a lot from being landlocked, I mean, that can be addressed at a later date. You may be able even to address it at a platting stage.
Do we need a new motion?
Not sure that helped.
Mr. Martinez, do we need a new motion? Can you hear me?
I think, so Jim, the motion that's on the table is to approve the original plat that was presented during the public hearing. We have a second. Can they vote on that? That's what was.
Yeah, I think my advice would be I wouldn't make the original or the subsequent plat part of the motion. We're not voting on a plat. We're not voting on the conceptual design. You're voting on a rezoning. It's just categorical zoning classifications. That's all you're doing.
So the motion should be to approve the plat with the variance.
If that's council's will, yes, I think that's a more appropriate motion rather than trying to address, the original or the subsequent one. It's just a rezone.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
I'm sorry, Mr. Garcia. And if I may add to Mr. Larte's comment, the original recommendation from staff was, again, for full transparency from the very beginning, staff has said that this is a good development, so we have said that our recommendation is to approve. We also had those two conditions of limiting the density to single-family residential, because you can do apartments in R2. Mr. Limas' concern was already mitigated from the very beginning. So again, condition number 1, only single-family residential, and then condition number 2, that the front setback is 10 feet, but the driveway is 20 feet, right? So that you don't have the cars encroaching on the pedestrian traffic sidewalk realm. And we did walk you through that as well.
Mr. Cruz?
So if all we're voting on tonight is the variance, the exception of the variances and the setbacks and all that, why was this presented then, the 30-foot driveway?
So, Mr. Cruz, it's a great question, right? But it also helps frame the conversation in terms of what you can expect, right? And then again, in speaking with the applicant from the very beginning, this is what they said this is what they're gonna plan, right? So we take them at their word. Can they come back with a totally different new plat, or not, it's not a plat, a new design? Yes. And then they still have to plat it, right? So you're gonna still get a second bite at the apple when they come with the plat that, to Mr. Escobar's point, will look exactly like this one.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion to approve right now item 15 on the ordinance approving the rezoning and the setbacks.
I believe we
Correct,
have
but
a
there's already a
on the
motion on the
Okay,
table.
my apologies.
So they,
I'd like to amend my motion to approve, the rezoning and the setbacks,
and the variance of the setbacks,
and the variance of the setbacks,
and the density not to exceed 17 homes.
and the density
The
not
two
to
staff
exceed
conditions?
as through staff conditions.
Yes, sir.
Second.
We do have a speaker for this item, but do we have a second?
Mr. Nevada's the second.
Okay.
Miriam Cruz.
Thank you. So I do think there's transparency issues here. And I'll point out the first one. This original general plan that, well, actually, the 30-foot thing, which was, I guess, the next slide, was not part of the backup. I take issue with this because just like the TIA that Mr. Reyna presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission on Tuesday, that was not part of our backup. It was presented to us at the meeting. We weren't given any printed copies. Anyway, going back to this one, this information would have been very helpful to have in the backup, and it seems that it was already provided, and it could have made it backup, and I'm just not understanding why, you know, these updates and images are not being included in the backup when literally that was the only thing that council had requested is go talk, Mr. Escobar, go talk to the constituents, see what can be done. That's the first point, is that I just think this information needs to be provided to the public. I understand that the Open Meetings Act and the posting requires that the agenda be posted, but obviously the backup is part of it and is always included, and this was made part of the backup. The second point is, the gentleman that talked, that is constituent, that's a neighbor, you know, is he here today speaking on behalf of the rest of the neighbors? Were the other neighbors notified
Cruz,
about
your
this
time
meeting?
is up.
Were they part of that?
Ruben Reyes.
Yes.
Cesar Nevares.
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia.
Aye.
Rudy Cruz.
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
All right. Tell Ms. Olivia. Motion on the table, Mr. Cruz?
I'd like to make a motion for a 5-minute recess.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Second. Yep.
Ruben Reyes.
Yes.
Cesar Nevares.
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia.
Aye.
Rudy Cruz.
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
We're taking a 5-minute break.
Yes, ma'am.
Muted.
Se fue de la junta. How's it going, Mr. Chan? Okay. I discovered golf balls that dissolve in water. So, if you upgrade the onion field to a putting range, a driving range, I can get you golf balls that dissolve in water. And they can
Okay, is everyone ready?
Unmuted.
It is 8:14 PM. This meeting is called to order. Grants Department, item number 16, discussion and action to approve Resolution 678, authorizing the submission of a grant application to the Office of the Governor, OOG, fiscal year 2023 Juvenile Justice and Truancy Prevention, JJTP, program for the Socorro Police Department. There is no match for this grant.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Alejandra Valadez, City Development Director. We are asking tonight for your approval for a grant application to the Juvenile Justice and Truancy Prevention Program for the Socorro Police Athletics League. We are requesting $23,500 for the funding of overtime officers who will act as the coaches and mentors for Socorro youth to participate in sports leagues. The purpose of the program is to reduce juvenile delinquency and truancy through programs such as the PAL program. There is no match requirement for this grant, but we are required to submit a resolution authorized by the City Council for the application. Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item 17, discussion and action to approve Resolution 679, authorizing the City of Socorro to submit a grant application to the Texas Department of Agriculture's Texas Community Development Block Grant, Texas CDBG 2022 Planning and Capacity Building Fund, and authorize mayor to act as the city's authorized representative in all matters pertaining to the city's participation in the Texas CDBG program. The city's grant match commitment is $18,750.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We are requesting your approval to submit this grant application to the Texas Community Development Block Grant Program through the Planning and Capacity Building Fund for the update and development of our zoning ordinances and Mission Trail historic guidelines, which have not been updated in many, many years. The city is requesting $75,000 in grant funding. There is a 25% match requirement, which totals to the $18,750 match amount. Our zoning ordinances and Mission Trail historic guidelines have not been updated in 10, 15 years or more. Recently, the county did complete the Mission Trail Comprehensive Plan, which includes some of those guidelines, but we need to do, review our existing guidelines and determine whether and if we're going to adopt some of those historic guidelines for the city of Socorro. I'm not sure if you have any questions.
I have one question.
Mr. Cruz?
I'm seeing a number of grant items that come up on this agenda for discussion and action, and I just want to make sure that before we begin to approve or deny, that the current budget right now, should we engage in the grant application and the match, will our budget right now support at least a 25% match on this one here?
Yes, so, and that's something that we're gonna bring, next agenda, because we don't wanna overcommit. Right, so next, Alejandra was assigned to make sure that she brings a presentation to tell you exactly how many matches we've agreed to. So moving forward, we have a better picture when we're approving these items that we're not overcommitting.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Mr. Cruz, we have a motion.
I'm sorry.
Ruben Reyes? Yes.
Cesar Nevares.
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia.
Aye.
Rudy Cruz.
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 19, discussion and action to approve a memorandum of understanding.
Mayor, 18.
I'm sorry, 19?
18.
Oh, 18. Discussion and action to approve the submission of a grant application and all required documentation to the National Park Services Save America's Treasure Grant Program for the Rio Vista Farm Rehabilitation Project. The city's grant match commitment is $500,000.
Mayor, we are going to ask if we can delete that item, and it's just because we haven't received our official nomination, historical nomination, and in order to apply for these type of grants, we have to have it already approved. I mean, it's been approved, but we haven't received the official letter.
Correct. Yeah, and we were advised by the National Park Service that sometimes they do allow applicants to explain that they're very close to that official designation. But in reaching out in the preparation for this item, the National Park Service came back and said, no, we're going to allow you to apply until you have your official designation. So we'll be back next year.
Motion to delete item 18?
Second.
Ruben Reyes.
Yes.
Cesar Nevares.
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia.
Aye.
Rudy Cruz.
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 19, discussion and action to approve a memorandum of understanding, MOU between the City Council of the City of Socorro and the Commissioners Court of El Paso County for the management of the watershed affected by 3 grant applications submitted to the Texas Water Development Board. Do we have a motion?
Motion up for discussion?
Second.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We are requesting your approval to enter into an MOU with El Paso County for the management of the watersheds that are going to be affected by 3 grant applications that have been recently submitted to the Texas Water Development Board for flood mitigation projects. On June 30th, 2020, the City of Socorro submitted an intent to apply to the Water Development Board. The Water Development Board received approximately 285 flood mitigation projects from across the state. They developed a prioritization list. On September 2021, the City of Socorro was invited to submit a full application. We have also learned that El Paso County has really prioritized stormwater and flood mitigation projects. They have also submitted 3 applications to the Water Development Board that are also moving along and that will benefit Socorro. One of them is by the will benefit the area around the Nuevo Hueco Tanks area. Another one will benefit the area around, 2 of them will benefit the area around the Cocor area. And then the City of Socorro has applied for the Sparks Arroyo project, which will benefit the area around Stockyard and Thunder Road. And so as part of the requirement for that program, we have to provide this MOU stating that the agencies are working collaboratively in the development of the projects because those watersheds not only affect Socorro, but also the county and Horizon. So this is what we're bringing for your approval today. The MOU included in the backup states that the city has submitted an application for flood mitigation, so has the county, and that we determined that we will continue to collaborate through the implementation of that project, of those projects.
Motion to approve?
We already had a motion. You made a motion.
Oh,
Motion for discussion.
can I amend my motion? To motion to approve?
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ruben Reyes.
Yes.
Cesar Nevares.
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia.
Aye.
Rudy Cruz.
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 20, discussion and action to enter into interlocal agreement between the City of Socorro and El Paso MHMR, doing business as Emergence Health Network to for the purpose of implementing and operating a crisis intervention team in the city of Socorro.
Motion to approve for discussion.
Second.
Mayor and Council, for this item, we are requesting your approval to enter into an interlocal agreement with Emergence Health Network for the implementation of the city's first crisis intervention team. As you know, the city of Socorro applied for and received $204,000 in grant funding from the U.S. Department of Justice Community Policing Department for the crisis intervention team. The crisis intervention team will be made up of 2 qualified mental health professionals that will be paired with a Socorro police officer. These 2 units will be deployed to calls for service that involve an individual that is experiencing a mental health crisis or has learning disability that requires a mental health professional on site. And the purpose is to reduce incarceration and get people services that they need to reduce offenses. The interlocal agreement is included in your backup and explains the obligations of both the Socorro Police Department, the City of Socorro, and Emergence Health Network as we implement this new CIT program.
Mr. Cruz?
So my question for the, I guess the engagement between the 2 mental health professionals alongside our police department. I read a little bit and it's stated that we're going to house these 2 individuals within the police department headquarters, is that correct?
That's right, and Chief can provide a little bit more detail about how that will work out.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Dave Burton, Chief of Police. So we will house the individuals along with their equipment inside the police department headquarters. They're actually going to be adjacent to a victim service advocate because of the pathway through the criminal justice system that certain individuals could take. Those individuals will probably end up by talking with each other, meeting with each other, because some of the clientele for both of them could be the same individuals or families.
Chief, is Emergent Health responsible for outfitting our offices, or are we going to be responsible for outfitting? Alongside that, are they going to also require support services from our IT department to set up their equipment?
So some of the grant funding covers their requirement as far as computer access. We also have to provide them with hotspots in the field so that they are allowed to enter their information on the spot, and that reduces the time as far as treatment is concerned if they need to get those individuals into facilities right away, as opposed to them bringing them back and having to write that report, in an office setting. So there were some equipment type processes that we needed to pay for, and we put them, Alejandro put them into the grant as much as we could, so that is in there. It also includes things like we have to provide them with a bulletproof vest or funding for a bulletproof vest. There's some hardware type, we're going to give them the radio, cell phones, etc. That hard type equipment also went into the grant.
I got a question. So while you were talking about what has the list here, bulletproof vest, tactical go bags, that's with the grant?
Yes, so this grant still requires about $75,000 from the city of Socorro, but that $204,000 was all incorporating into what we foresaw as far as the program was concerned. So that $75,000 that we have to come up with is split amongst all of this, right? It's a little piece of the percentage as far as what that equipment or electronics needs are, or what they are.
Ruben Reyes.
Yes.
Cesar Nevares.
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia.
Aye.
Rudy Cruz.
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 21, discussion and action to approve the proposed updates to the spending framework for the City of Socorro's allocation under the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund approved in the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA.
Motion to open for discussion.
Second.
Mayor and Council, this item, we are requesting your approval for updates to the spending framework for the American Rescue Plan Act allocation for the city of Socorro. As you all know, we approved this framework on October 21st based on eligible costs and guidance provided by the U.S. Treasury. And we want to remind you again that we'll be bringing back periodical updates and changes to this framework as things change. One of the items that was approved initially was costs for administrative personnel. So today, we are reducing $26,400 from that previously approved item of administrative personnel and allocating that to administrative software, which is our grants management software, eCivis. We have been working through implementation of that grants management software through most of 2021. We're about at 75% implementation on that software, but the license for year 2 and year 3 have not been secured yet, and so that's why we're coming to you to request the use of those funds for that grants management software. As you can see, there is no increase or decrease in the total amount because we took some funding from the already approved administrative personnel line item to allocate for the software. The software tracks ARPA allocations along with CARES Act allocations and integrates with our Avila financial software as well.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares.
Yes.
It's approved.
It's approved?
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 22, discussion and action to adopt Resolution 680, approving the application filing with the Texas Water Development Board requesting financial assistance for the Sparks Arroyo Drainage Project. The total project cost is $11,097,885. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Who made the motion?
Me.
Nevares.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This is an update to the previously approved resolution approved by Council on October 28th, 2021. Due to an increase in the budgeted costs for the Sparks Arroyo project, the Texas Water Development Board has increased the grant funding that is available to the city, as well as a zero-interest loan amount that is available to the city to cover the total project cost of $11,997,885 for the Sparks Arroyo project. I just want to remind you that the city is also contributing $1 million from its ARPA allocation for this stormwater flood mitigation project as well. And we are moving along quite well in the process of securing the financing for this project. And if all goes well, we will have approval from the Water Development Board sometime in April. I apologize. And I'd like to add that we are bringing this back because since the amounts changed, the resolution has to match the grant, the project funds that have increased.
Ruben Reyes, Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Moving on to planning and zoning, item number 23, discussion and action to approve resolution 681 for the preliminary and final subdivision plats combination for Valle del Sol, Unit 8. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve for discussion.
Second.
Second.
Mayor and Council, good evening. Carlos Gainar once again. So this is both a preliminary and final plat, and the reason that you're able to review both at the same time Typically, we bring you the preliminary, right, and then you vote on it, and then several months back later, we bring you the final. But the reason that this is the next two items is because there's no public improvements that will be dedicated to the city. And so the process requires a preliminary and a final, and the process also allows for staff and P&Z and City Council to review both at the same time. So that's what's in front of you. This is Valle del Sol Unit 8. I think many of you are familiar with Valle del Sol as a master plan. There's Unit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is number 8. Again, the request is for a preliminary and final plat approval. Property is Zone C2. It's about 5.2 acres. Future land use map has this as commercial. It is currently vacant. And then the history on this, as I mentioned, that there has been part of the Valle del Sol master plan. And then the plat itself contains one commercial lot, and then it also dedicates an additional 10 feet of space on Moon Road so that at some point we're able to make the expansion of Moon Road as well. And we are recommending approval, and so is the P&Z. They voted 5-1 on February 15th. Again, just quickly on these, the location map, it's on North Loop and Moon Road. Zoning is C2. Next slide, those shows the images currently vacant. Here's the aerial. Next aerial shows it at a greater distance, and then the preliminary plat. Preliminary plat shows sort of just the general idea, some of the elevations in the land, and then the final plat. Next slide, yeah, just shows one large lot, and that is what is in front of you. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
No questions?
Motion to approve?
We have a motion.
Sorry.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 24, discussion and action to approve Resolution 682 for a preliminary and final subdivision plats combination for Caesar Unit 1.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is another one similarly to the one you just heard, both a preliminary and final plat. This one, the only difference is that it's in the ETJ. It's not within the city of Socorro. We still have purview over subdivision plats. It is 10.2 acres. There's no zoning because there's no zoning out in the county. Current land use is vacant, and the plat would create 7 lots and a private pond. And so again, nothing will be dedicated to the city of Socorro, as I mentioned, so there's no public improvements. Next slide. Staff is recommending approval, and the P&Z voted to approve 6-0 on February 15th. Next slide just shows the location. This is on the corner of Nuevo Hueco Tanks and I-10. Again, just right outside the Socorro city limits. Here's the view of the property, currently vacant. Aerial of the property. So again, on that southeast corner of I-10 and Nuevo Hueco. Another view of the aerial. The preliminary plat, again, shows the 7 lots. And then the final plat, again, 7 lots, 1 private pond. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
And we need a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 25, presentation, discussion, and action on parks, open spaces, and landscaping requirements, and to direct staff to rewrite City of Socorro ordinances.
Mayor and Council, so this is I know it's getting late, and there's a lot of information that I want to cover, but I think it's important information. The reason that we're bringing this forward to you, as you know, my time here with the City of Socorro has been relatively short. Past year, when having different conversations with the city manager, just in terms of the vision that you all have, that she has, that the residents of Socorro have, we sort of started to talk about different conversations, right? And one of them has to do with the public realm, parks, open spaces, landscaping, the way that things look. In addition to that, I had a great conversation with Mr. Reyes during the Christmas or the holiday party. And so those two, Mr. Reyes making some comments about landscaping and, you know, how come we don't have these different types of parks? And then again, having a conversation with the city manager, we felt it was important to bring this item to you. When it comes to urban, so next slide for introduction. So before we get into sort of the nuts and bolts of parks, right, and why it's important that cities provide parks, I want to just frame the conversation a little bit in terms of health and the built environment, right? So just the built environment, as you may know, is everything that is not made by nature, right? So the river is nature, the mountains, the Franklin Mountains are nature, the desert is made by science and nature and God perhaps, but everything that is man-made or person-made is what we refer to as a built environment. Streets, sidewalks, homes, doorknobs, light posts, park benches, grass, right? All these things that are made by policies and people and again, things that affect our health, right? So every single thing that is part of the built environment was once designed and or allocated by someone, right? And we know that these things start to affect the way that we live, start to affect the way that we interact with each other. The next slide. So you may ask then, how does the built environment influence our lives, right? So it has to do with our homes, right? Where we live. It has to do with our streets, how we travel, or if we're not able to travel, if there's accessibility issues, right? And streets are not just for vehicular traffic, right? If designed well, streets can carry water, right? Stormwater. If designed well, streets can add to the urban appeal of a city, right? If they have street trees, if they're multimodal, right? You could design streets that include transit and wide sidewalks and bicycle lanes. Again, built environment, right? Made by us. The parks, right? How we keep healthy, how we have fun, how we engage with our community, commercial areas where we shop, employment centers where we work or how people make a living, neighborhoods, how we live, right? And how we engage with others. And schools, obviously, where our kids and build their own community, right? Where they learn to be humans. The built environment, again, these things are created by ordinances. The reason that you see me week after week come to you with zoning regulations and subdivisions regulations is because I can't decide what those are. You can't decide unless you voted for them. Mr. Escobar, you know, just as an example, can't tell me, Carlos, I want to build a 12-wide street. It's not arbitrary, right? There are very specific things in ordinances that require the way that things look, right? So again, another example, R1 requires a 10,000 square foot lot, not a 5,000 square foot lot, not a 2,000 square foot lot, not a 8,000 square foot lot, right? That's what it requires. That's what the code requires. And all of these dimensions, again, are part of the built environment that then start to affect the way that we live, the way that we interact, the way that we maintain our health. And so these are just some examples of what is considered a part of the regulations, whether it's subdivision or zoning. You're looking at streets, you're looking at parks, you're looking at blocking lots, you're looking at house houses and drainage as just some examples, right? Real quickly, the next slide. So the World Health Organization calls the definition of health that if it's not just not feeling healthy physically, right? If you may feel healthy physically, but if you're not mentally well, you're unhealthy, you're not doing well, right? So it's not just it's the complete mental and social well-being and not just not feeling well, right? So the complete definition of health is all those three things: physical, mental, and well-being, right? The way that you interact with the community. And again, next slide, affected by the built environment, right? So again, physical and mental health is what we call the definition of well-being. The next slide shows the health and the built environment, 2020 causes of death. So if you look at the arrows, right, we know that COVID has changed the dynamics for many, many reasons and in many, many areas. But the number one indicator of death in the United States, it was true in 2020, it was true in 2010, and it was true in the year 2000, is heart disease, right? And those are things that are not, some of it is hereditary, but some of it is also lifestyle, some of it is also the way that the built environment may or may not encourage physical activity. So again, physical inactivity, next slide. Right, we know that the environment affects health directly and indirectly. We know that deaths from chronic diseases have replaced deaths from infectious diseases, as Commissioner Holguin may know. Right, in the year 1900, people were dying from infectious diseases, cholera, airborne diseases in the water, right? Those have now been replaced by by chronic diseases, heart disease, diabetes, respiratory issues, right? All can be tied to the built environment. And then finally, right, next slide. So we know this is from different planning literature that says moderately intense activities can be built into the lives of many Americans by changing the way communities are designed and built, right? And it goes on to say, however, when our communities and neighborhoods are structured so that they inhibit or prevent such activities, as is in the case of most parts of the country, many people are unable to get the amount of physical activity needed for long-term health. All this is saying is, listen, for most people, right, many people are not going to go to the gym. Many people don't have time to go to the gym. You're going to get home from work. You're tired. You know, you want to have dinner. You want to hang out with your kids. You want to watch a little bit of TV. It's really difficult to put in a little bit of exercise, right? But if there's a park nearby, if there are streets nearby, if there are streets that are safe with sidewalks and lighting and street trees, you're going to take that walk. You're going to go outside and get a little bit of health and a little bit of exercise within your neighborhood, right? But what this is saying, and I think it's true of Socorro, it's true of many parts of El Paso County, many parts of El Paso, we are designing neighborhoods in a way that don't allow us that accessibility to recreational activities, right? So, with that, I'll get into why parks matter. Next slide. A lot of this information is taken from two resources. One, Socorro's Parks Master Plan, and Socorro's comprehensive plan. But before I get into the data, this is sort of just general, good best practices of why we, in the planning world, why we build parks, right? So we know that, again, as I mentioned, they're good for healthy lifestyles. We know for a fact that they reduce crime. When kids have access to rec centers, when kids have access to play fields, when kids have access to parks, when kids have access to trails, they're going to be doing those things, right? When they don't have access to those things, they're going to find other things to do. We know that they also increase property values, right? We know that lots and homes that are adjacent to parks or fronting parks have a greater resale value. We also know that they create competitive cities, right? People nowadays are looking to move to cities that can offer these types of amenities, right? Whether it's El Paso or Horizon or Socorro. Unlike our parents' generation that moved to cities or neighborhoods because of work, many people are now looking, especially after COVID, being able to work from home, very specifically looking, hey, maybe I want to go live in San Antonio because I could still work in El Paso. Maybe I want to go live in Albuquerque because I could still live in El Paso, and Albuquerque has parks, San Antonio has the Riverwalk, San Antonio has a great downtown, right? These are sort of just some examples of what we look at. And then they make communities attractive, right? The curb appeal, the attractiveness, which I'll talk about in the landscaping and open space aspect of it. And then we know that there are environmental benefits, right? Both when we plant trees and when we have grass to mitigate the water runoff. So overall, these are some of the reasons why we create parks. Real quick, again, these are some data from the National Recreation and Park Association, right? Parks have health power. Increased access to places for physical activity leads to a 25% increase in people exercising 3 or more days a week. Parks have safety power. In Macon, Georgia, a revitalized park that included new programming and beautification efforts reduced incidents of crime and violence by 50%. Just another slide, and this one is from Active Living Research, which is its own organization. Property values, homes near parks can sell for up to $2,200 more than homes without parks nearby. Racial disparities, right? It's also an issue of equity. Across the country, 70% of African American neighborhoods and 81% of Hispanic and Latino neighborhoods lack recreation facilities compared to 38% of white American neighborhoods. So it's good for the environment, it's good for our property values, it's good for the economy, but it's also an issue of disparity and equity. So now let me talk about the city's Socorro Parks data, right? Again, this is taken from the city's Parks Master Plan. We know that these are the locations of your parks. The table on the right shows the different types of amenities within all your different parks. So if you take a look at it, there's not very many soccer fields. We don't have very many baseball fields. We have 7 basketball courts throughout the whole city of Socorro. We have 1 pier dock, we have 1 splash pad, right? As this was the inventory that was taken about 3 years ago. This is also an important slide, the next slide. This is also taken from the city's comprehensive plan. So what the comprehensive plan did is it combined all of your different acres and land uses. And so we know from this data that less than 1% of Socorro's land use is dedicated to parks, okay? And then we know that there's different types of parks. So this is part of the backup that just shows the different types of parks. In the total acreage, and there's about 13,000 acres in the city of Socorro, we have about 70 acres of parkland within the city, right? So always room for improvement, always room to increase that number. This is taken from the El Paso County Parks Plan, which was approved by Commissioner's Court, I believe, back in October or November. And this just gives you an example. Next slide. I'm sorry, Victor. This just gives you an example of the different types of parks, right? So you have regional parks, you have community parks, you have a neighborhood park, you have a pocket park. Think of a regional park as like Chamizal, Ascarate, right? Those are all, everyone from El Paso County goes to those parks. Socorro doesn't necessarily need a regional park, right? It's not big enough. We have the Sportsplex. We have, again, Chamizal, Ascarate. But as a community, you do need community parks. You do need pocket parks. You do need neighborhood parks, right? Things that, again, are more accessible to residents living and working in Socorro. How do we rank? And then this is, again, also from the Parks Master Plan, right? So when we talk about median parks, right, the number of parks per 10,000 residents, Socorro has 3 parks median, right, in the middle, compared to 5.6 with other peer cities. I'm not 100% sure what those peer cities are. Maybe Horizon, El Paso, Las Cruces, Laredo. But the point is that, again, when we rank it with peer cities, we know that there's room for improvement. And then parks per 1,000 residents, we have 1.4 acres of park compared to almost 10 acres of park in our peer cities per 10,000 residents. I'm sorry, per 1,000 residents. Next slide. I'm going to go through these quickly, folks. So again, this is data that was taken from the Parks Master Plan. The question was asked, how would you rate your satisfaction with the quantity, not the quality, the number of parks? And people were not satisfied at all, right? Almost 50% said, 24% said not satisfied at all. Number 2, 36% said somewhat not satisfied. So the point is that we know that residents are also recognizing that the city of Socorro could utilize more parks. The second question is, how would you rate your satisfaction with the variety of parks? And again, not satisfied, right? So just because you have turf and grass doesn't necessarily mean it's a park, right? When you don't have street trees, when you don't have basketball courts, when you don't have playgrounds, people are going to tend to not use those things. And then again, how would you rate the importance of building more parks? And overwhelmingly, 18 plus 70, almost 90% of residents that answered this survey said it's important for the city to build more parks. And then last question, how would you rate the importance of having a variety of parks? And again, people recognize that we need more parks in the city of Socorro. Final question, and this is actually, next slide, Victor. This is actually a really great slide, or a really great question, because it asks, which park do you attend the most? 68.2, or that red area, where it's answered. Anybody want to take a guess what that park is? Bulldog Park, right? It's such a beautiful park, right? Think of the splash pad, the walking trail, the little lake, the amphitheater, the open space. So we know that when you build parks that have good quality, right? Different amenities, built correctly for different uses, for different populations, for different ages, people will use them. And so again, not surprising here that many people are considering Bulldog Park the most important. Landscaping standards, again, this is just some current conditions. Next slide. You can go through these quickly. Next slide. Next slide. And next slide. And then, one of the things that the city of Socorro could start doing is requiring better standards. And so we could require, and I'll get to that towards the end of the presentation, we could require landscaping plans, right? We could require native foliage, native plants that are native to the Southwest that, again, start to increase the visibility and aesthetics of a city. I'll tell you a quick story. Mr. Valderrama, who's our building official, great, awesome individual. He lives in Socorro, born and raised in Socorro, has lived most of his life in Socorro with a few years in exception in Amarillo. Just yesterday and today, as I was putting the presentation together, I said, hey, Mr. Valderrama, I need a picture for this presentation. Can you help me identify an area of Socorro that has really great landscaping, right? And the pictures that I just showed you are what he came up with. And if you drive around, right, the reason that you don't see the landscaping that we feel that we should see is because we don't require it. And again, I'm going to get to that in just a minute. So again, going back to the built environment and how policies and ordinances can affect that, right? Open space planning, this is an important one, and I don't even know how to address it, to be quite honest with you, because it is the open space, the farmland, the agricultural land is what makes Socorro. I'll tell you another story. I drive from Sunset Heights down Loop 375. All my, I'm on 375, asphalt, highway, North Loop, more asphalt, more cars. And then I make that left onto Rio Vista, and my soul feels better, right? It feels good. And so this is what makes Socorro. But we're going to lose it, folks. And so this slide also taken from your comprehensive plan. If you look at the first, again, it's the different land uses, right? Agricultural, commercial, residential, parks. This is the same slide I showed earlier. The top line says, look at the second to last column. Percentage of total acreage in 1988, almost 60%. Percentage of total acreage in agricultural in 2011, 33%. And it's probably gone down in the past 10 years. So in about a generation, Socorro has lost about 27% of its agricultural land, right? And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Development and growth is not a bad thing, right? But it will be a bad thing if you don't start to set in motion some degree of policies to start to conserve some of that open space. So again, just, right, this is what makes Socorro. This is what is the aesthetics of this community. Next slide. Next slide. And one other thing, I could be standing on Nuevo Hueco Tanks and looking at the subdivisions, and I could be anywhere, even I could be in New Jersey. I could be standing on Socorro Road or on one of these fields, and I know that I am in Socorro, right? The uniqueness, identity of this community is found in your natural assets that you have. Next slide. So the next steps. So here's next slide, Victor. Thank you. Next slide. So the way that you create more parks is that there's three different ways, right? But the three most common ways is you write them into your city policies. So, can the city raise the bar a little bit in their subdivision ordinance, right? When a developer comes in and they want to build a subdivision with 100 lots, we may or may not require a park. It's still unclear, and I'll show you why. But that's where you would say, hey, developer, in exchange for building in our city, in exchange for public services, in exchange for getting that plat approval and that rezoning, we want you to build parks. The other way is quality of life bonds, right? And I know those are a little bit controversial because they raise taxes and people feel that they're taxed out. But it is one way, and it is utilized for bigger parks, rec centers, aquatic centers, libraries, improvements to parks, right? And it's asking voters to invest in themselves. And then again, these are tied to regional community parks facilities. And then perhaps to increase the amount of recreational spaces, joint use agreements between the city and Socorro ISD, right? So don't forget that the assets that the Socorro ISD has are community assets, right? The playgrounds, the play fields, perhaps even the gyms. Those are things that are paid with taxpayer money. Many times they're closed at 4 o'clock. Many times they're closed on the weekend. So I know that EPISD had entered into an agreement with the city of El Paso to allow some, not all of them, right? I recognize that there's liability issues and maintenance issues that the school district wants to also maintain, but that EPISD was able to open up after, from 5 to say 8 o'clock. Most of the high school fields are open, right? When there's no practice. Most of the playgrounds in the elementaries are open. So that's one way to increase the quantity of parkland and recreational amenities. This is what our ordinance says. Next slide. This is what the City of Socorro ordinance says when it comes to parks. This is it. This is what it says. The subdivider shall transfer to the city 2.5% of the total land to be subdivided or an equivalent dollar value which shall be used by the city for parks and recreation or other city use. It's not clear. Is it 2.5% of the land or is it 2.5% of the value of the development? If it's 2.5% of the value of the development, who makes that call? Is it the developer? Is it the city? Is it, do you go back and forth? It's not specific, right? This is what the City of El Paso's parkland dedication says. And it's really long, but I just wanted to show you some of the bullet points. Parkland dedication ordinance established in 1989 for 1 acre. For every 100 single-family homes, the developer needs to, they don't have the option, will dedicate 1 acre of parkland. If it's 200 multifamily units, 1 acre of parkland, right? It's quantifiable. There's no going back and forth between staff and the developer. If under 100 units, the developer needs to pay $1,370 per single-family lot or $680 per apartment. And what the City of El Paso does is that they have these park zones. I'm not 100% sure what the geographic areas of the zone, but if there's a development within, just say, Zone 1, that money goes into the nearest park in that zone for improvements, for playgrounds, for turf, for anything that has to do with improving the park, right? And again, the point here being, folks, is that it's quantifiable. It's very specific, right? So maybe that's sort of the direction that we may want to look at. And then finally, the projects are designed and built following parks design and construction standards. There's a buffet of lists that the developer has to do. So at the very minimum, turf and irrigation and sidewalks. And then out of this 10 lists of things, 10 parks, 5 park benches, 1 picnic table, basketball court, something like that, right? The developer then picks 2 or 3 of those so that you now start to add amenities to the different parks. And then finally, on the landscaping ordinance, this is what this is the word landscaping is shown maybe 10 times in our ordinance. This is what it says. The location and details of walls, fences, screening, and landscaping, et cetera, should be included in the site plan. Language needs to be specific and quantifiable, because when it says that, then the developer comes in and shows, hey, 1 tree and 1 little area of grass, that's landscaping, right? We can't then turn around and say, well, we want more. Well, Carlos, where does it say in your code that you want more, and how many? Well, put 10 trees and 20 shrubs and some grass and, right, expand the area. Well, Carlos Gainat and City of Socorro, your code doesn't say that. And so developers are going to do the very bare minimum, right? And so, again, as an example, landscape, next slide. The landscape ordinance of the City of El Paso, it's really long, but you need to have a plan. And then next slide, the most important, I know it's a little bit technical, essentially what it says, that they have to dedicate 15% of their land after the building is placed for landscaping. So again, it could be 8%, it could be 7%, whatever the council chooses for it to be, but it's very specific, right? Again, there's no guessing, there's no ambiguity, there's no going back and forth. The developer knows exactly what the expectations are. And then finally, so this is what we're asking, Mayor and Council. I know it's a long-winded presentation and it's getting late, but essentially what we're asking is to, number 1, direct staff to review and revise subdivision ordinance for parkland dedication requirements. Number 2, direct staff to review the possibility of a MOU with Socorro ISC for shared use of facilities. Number 3, direct staff to review and revise fee structure for park and facilities rentals. There's also some ambiguity in that regard. We don't know how much we charge. Sometimes people write a check to use the park and then we turn around and give it back to them. The totality of the park ordinance should also look at that fee structure. And then in the midterm future, come back with recommendations for landscaping and open space policies. And then perhaps a little bit more long-term, let's also review our streets, right? And our sidewalks and our green infrastructure, the way that we carry water. Sometimes it's so wasteful, right? Building this huge pond and hole in the ground that's only utilized for 2 weeks in July. It's a waste of land, it's a waste of resources, it's so expensive. There are better ways that we could utilize, again, in the way that we treat the environment, in the way that we treat our city. And so I know it's a lot of information. I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, right, there's so many really beautiful aspects of this city and this community. We recognize, I think it's great to do a little bit of introspection and recognize that there's always room for improvement. And we could get there, right, with little by little looking at our ordinances and create a city and a quality of life that you guys deserve, that we deserve, that the citizens of Socorro deserve, and that they should expect living in a city like ours. Happy to answer any questions, Mayor and Council.
Mr. Garcia?
Great presentation,
Yes, sir.
amazing. You know, and the one thing that I see is that we need to recognize where we're not good at to get better at it.
That's
and
right.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
I think it's known that I'm really want our city with parks as well, and bringing in the youth sports, bringing in the softball, bringing in the athletics.
That's right.
So there's something like this to me was awesome, and whatever you need, I'm there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Mr. Cruz?
Mr. Gainar, currently, right now, what's the total acreage within our city for parkland?
So as I showed in the slide, it's about 69 acres.
Okay, based off of the 2014 master plan for the city that was written back in 2014,
Yes, sir.
by 2030, we were to have acquired 693 acres worth of parkland. I don't think that's going to be done within 8 years, right?
That's
But
right.
what I think is feasible and is an attainable goal for this city moving forward is that the parks that are now created with future development, and even maybe some of the existing development, I'm seeing that there's a lot of grass areas that requires a lot of water and a lot of
That's right.
maintenance. The developers come in, they build these huge parks, and sometimes they're just large grassy areas, and in the end, we are required to maintain those parks. It's a lot of manpower, labor, and hours that go into maintaining the parks. So yes, I do like the idea of the vegetation that needs to be placed. I also agree with the requirements that we need to set for the developers to come in and create a park that's going to be more economically, I guess, what's the term you would use? Just something easier to maintain.
Yes, sir.
Moving
That's right.
forward.
That's
And,
right, Mr. Cruz.
I also would like for the city to engage in partnerships to where outside entities can come inside and utilize our parks, but we can acquire a fee of some sort, because I've seen some pretty large parks in new developments in Socorro, and I think we have the ability to do that. But yes, I agree, we need to start setting the standard high for the developers coming in here. What's the minimum required standard right now in our city for the population or the amount of homes that are built in a subdivision? Because there's different types of parks. There's community parks, and
Yeah,
then
that's
there's
right.
there's mini parks and stuff like that. So does that need a change? And then my next question to you is, would the city need to enter maybe like a 120-day moratorium for you and your staff to work and not have the influx of the permits and applications coming in?
The answer to your first question is yes, sir. I mean, again, right, if you look at parks and the way that people interact with parks, and, you know, when we have little chiquititos, you take them to tot lots, right? You don't take them to the big park where the big kids are playing. When you have big kids, you don't take them to the tot lot. They're playing basketball, they're skateboarding. So yes, sir, the idea is that you have different types of parks for different types of people and different types of Socorro. And yes, not all of it has to be grass, right? There could be a really beautifully designed, for example, a placita that is cement or cobblestone or some other maintenance-free design that is still enjoyed on Sundays, that still brings people outside, right? So yes, the answer to your question is yes, there are different park types that the city can start to look at. Some of them will be done by the developer, and some of them aren't. You can't expect a developer to, for example, to build you a rec center on a subdivision, right? I know I'm exaggerating, but that's one example. But can you expect them to build you a 2 or 3 acre park with a playground and maybe a basketball court? Yeah, you should expect that. To your second question, I don't know. I think I haven't thought about it. I mean, I think what you're asking a moratorium is that starting tomorrow or whenever it's enacted, that we no longer accept subdivision plats, except for the ones that we're currently processing. I'm going to be quite honest with you, Mr. Cruz. I don't have an answer for you. It's something I think we'd have to think about, right? I don't want to give you offhanded response that might be a little bit irresponsible on my part without thinking of what that does to development, what that does to what the projects that you currently have. So I'm happy to come back with you on that one.
I want to know, how would we handle the parks that are not ours? Would, like, for example, Cougar Park, do you have a plan for that? I know that you're looking at an MOU with SISD for some of the parks. Would you also write that in as well?
Yeah, Mayor, so really the MOU would be that the city of Socorro and its residents, and again, my understanding is that there may already be one, right? Or maybe it wasn't finalized.
Correct. So Cougar Park is the city, it's
Yeah, that's
city-owned. The Rio Vista across the street is actually Texas A&M, and we do lease it out. I don't think we have any agreements with SISD for any of the parks. I don't think they own.
No, he's saying
Yeah,
that he would create one,
The-
right?
Yes, ma'am. The way, so to answer your question, the MOU really is for, I mean, if I'm in simpler terms, it's really a one-way street for SISD to open up its facilities for residents, right? Maybe in the MOU, again, maybe the city puts in a little bit of money for maintenance or some liability. But the idea, Mayor, is that this is my professional opinion, right? Again, these are community assets. They're owned by the community. They're paid by taxpayer money. Yeah, it's wonderful that our kids get to enjoy it, right? We want our kids to go to the best freaking facilities anywhere, right? But at the end of the day, you also want, can the community benefit a little bit more from that, right?
Right.
There is we did start one. We have been in the process of talking
Okay.
with SISD as for the youth sports. A constituent did contact me about using tennis courts. And that's
right.
It's in the beginning of
That's exactly
stages.
it.
So I think we can take them to the next level and just go with that now, because of course taxpayer money pays for the football fields,
That's
for
right.
the basketball courts, and with the youth stuff that we're bringing along, I think that is a must, because the facilities are there, and hopefully we can just have a stronger relationship with SISD in the future.
Perfect. Any other questions? Comments?
And we need a motion.
Is the motion gonna be to direct staff to rewrite the ordinances regarding parks, open spaces, and landscaping for the city of Socorro? Or
So
Correct.
I'm sorry, Victor, can you go back to the slide that just shows the next steps?
What they asked for.
So, Mr. Reyes, the motion could include however, whatever, these are our recommendations to you. You could just say, hey, just do the subdivision ordinance, or just do the MOU, however you feel comfortable us directing it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. However, the motion and the way the agenda is written is right. So if the motion doesn't include all, make sure that the motion
Yes.
includes what it exactly, or if you want to add more, you can.
I think we should just do all of them, because if not, we're gonna have to come back with another item for each one of them.
Second.
And with the recommendations that Mr. Gallina just pointed out in his presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And we have a speaker for this item, Miriam Cruz.
Not on the line.
She's no longer on the line.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colombia Lobos is absent.
Thank you so much, Mayor, Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to city manager, item number 26.
Ma'am, I wanna make a motion to move item number 29 at the front, as we have speakers waiting for that item.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
29.
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colombia Lobos is absent.
So, good evening, Mayor and Council. This item is actually,
Haven't read it.
oh, sorry.
Item number 29, discussion and action to review and assess the petition from the residents of East Lake Valley regarding the condition of the property located at or near Nuevo Hueco Tanks Boulevard, Judge Coldwell Street, Blue Valley Street, and Canary Valley Street.
Mr. Nevares, do you want me to steal your thunder?
Yes.
Okay. So this item has been brought up because you all received a petition, Mayor and Mr. Nevares received a petition regarding the Wing Daddies on Nuevo Hueco Tanks Road, correct? And there is no separation between the rock wall. We apologize. So we had received a petition from the neighbors and the surrounding area of Nuevo Hueco Tanks Road regarding the new Wing Daddies. Unfortunately, our ordinance does not require a rock wall because there is a street in between the location and the residential area, and the ordinance is not very specific. And the reason it was brought up is Mr. Nevares wanted to make sure that, number one, he addresses the petition, and number two, in order for council to discuss options or how we want to handle moving forward the request and this petition that has come to you all to discuss.
So motion for discussion? Second. I believe the last meeting that we met, there was concerns from the residents off of East Lake. We know that there's the new construction of the Wing Daddies. And just by passing through there, you can see that, yes, although our ordinances do state that it is not a requirement for a commercial entity to build a rock wall, that it does not directly abut residential because of the separation of those two properties. I feel that for the residents, it does. I mean, if you pass by there and you're sitting in your living room and you live right behind Wing Daddies, you're gonna have car lights shining in through your front window there. I can see that, and I can see how that may molest the residents who live in that area. But I believe Mr. Nevares wanted to bring it up because it is an area that he represents, and the petition that was filed by the residents is a concern, and if there's any way that Mr. Gallinar can answer some of our questions in reference to it. I have looked at the plans, and I do see that there's a separation there, but the only separation that we're talking about is a street. There really isn't a barrier that blocks the commercial business from the residential. And if there's any other, have we reached out to the developer?
So, Mr. Cruz, first, couple of things. One, first of all, I did meet with Mr. and Mrs. Ramos a few weeks back, shortly after the last city council had a good conversation with her and some of her neighbors. You know, unfortunately, what happens is that some of so a couple of things. One, the rock wall is not, can't require, the code is not required. The other aspect of it is that there's a driveway directly on the residential, which, you know, I believe it was approved when the site plan came in, so talking about site plans, right, you look at driveways, landscaping, all these things. But unfortunately, we just didn't catch it, right, we missed it, that we could perhaps, so the code doesn't necessarily prohibit a driveway on the residential he said he's open to that, and then I also said, what about closing off that driveway? He also said, maybe let's dig through that and see what that does. So I did have an initial conversation with him. We didn't settle on anything until we had this conversation with council. So again, depending on how council wants to handle it, happy to go back to Mr. Gomez and see what sort of things they could do.
Mr. Reyes?
Could we let the speakers come up and?
We have to close the item here and then go into the public comment, right?
Or?
Oh. We can, I think we can let them speak.
Do you, I mean, Mayor?
Yes.
Okay.
Angelina Ramos.
Angelina Ramos? Okay, perfecto.
I was a lawyer. I am a lawyer, a retired lawyer, and I thought that you have the wrong meaning of the law. And I'm going to check later with another more, ¿qué can I say here?
Si quiere hablar en español,
Una
puede.
persona con mejor conocimiento de las leyes, with better understanding of the law about that particular law, because the law said that when a commercial lot and the residence met, it has to be a wall. It doesn't say that if there's a street, it doesn't say if. It's strict. The law is straight. If they met, it has to be a wall, rock wall. And it requires a rock wall. It's state. There are only permits rock walls in Socorro, Texas. Not other fences, not iron fences. Thank you.
Did you want to clarify that comment by the gentleman?
Mr. Martinez?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Gallinar is asking if you can clarify the comment that was made by the resident regarding the Texas state law on the rock wall abutting the residential area.
Yes, ma'am, and I was having trouble hearing. There's a problem with the mics. When Carlos was speaking recently, it was very distant and very muffled. It was just hard. It was hard to understand much.
Yeah, I couldn't hear anything.
Right. Yeah, I got the same thing. But I did hear what the citizen said. I simply disagree that we do have an ordinance. I'm going to quote from it. I believe it's, if I can get it right, 46-637 subsection C3C. No masonry fence shall be required where a street is the boundary line between the districts. That's what it says. And there's an exception, but it does not apply to manufacturing used for outside storage. That's not what we're dealing with.
Were you guys able to hear that?
Can you repeat the code, Mr. Martinez?
Yes, ma'am. I don't know if Mr. Nevares is having the same trouble, but not only, it appears to be the audio from Carlos's mic, but also from members of council. Suddenly we couldn't hear it, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
But you can hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
The ordinance section, it's 46-637. And then the subsection is Charlie 3 Charlie, that is C3C.
Okay, so, they're disputing, I guess, what the ordinance says and what the Texas.
On the Zoom call that I'm looking at, the city council's mics are muted. The city council connection is muted for some reason.
Yes, Jim, I was sorry, the conference call dropped, so we have to wait until they connect back up. Okay, Jim.
Yes, ma'am. Were you looking for the section number?
Correct, so the man quoted the Texas Government Code, correct? That the state law states something different. So I think it was like if a commercial business is right next to it's right next to a residential area, it requires a rock wall. So he's saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong. So there is a commercial business, and across the street, there is a residential area, right? So there is commercial and residential. We are stating that because there is a street in between the residential area and the commercial area, we can't require them to have a rock wall. Go ahead.
And let me say two things. I didn't hear put even the code or the chapter that he referred to. Did he identify a chapter or a section?
Do you have the Texas code? Okay, so he doesn't have it with him. What I can do is meet with them, get all of that information so we can make that clarification to them.
Sure. And all I was going to say is I'm not familiar. I don't know of any part of state law that requires that. Just off the top of my head, it'd be a little unusual for state law to get down to the specificity level of saying when you require a masonry wall and when you don't. That's unusual. But the other thing, the part I was reading about a masonry fence not being required, that's from our city code. It's a part of the city code. It's an ordinance that we have. And the only thing I said is you said we can't require it. Actually, I would dispute that, and I would invite Carlos's input. The statute I've read, the ordinance I've read, it says it's not required. Okay, it's not required by statute. It doesn't say the city is prohibited from requiring one. It says that statute doesn't require one. As a discretionary matter, for any number of reasons, the city may require one, may encourage one, may suggest one, but that would be something that you would do at the plat approval stage. That's the kind of thing that happens that gets negotiated through the plat approval process routinely. You know, how many entrances are you going to have to the subdivision? How many exits? For this kind of development, how many curb cuts and how many parking spaces are you going to have? And what kind of amenities we're requiring in terms of landscaping? I mean, that's it sounds. I don't mean it in a pejorative way, but the truth is, when it comes to plat approval, there is a bit of horse trading going on. I mean, it's really a negotiated process.
Correct. So this plat was approved without a rock wall.
Right. No, I understand that, and Mr. Gallinat and I had discussed, well, that the rock wall isn't required in the plat. I mean, the time to do that was, if the council was going to oppose that requirement and say, this is mandatory, that would have been done at the preliminary plat approval stage.
Correct. So I think the real question is like, what options do we have? So allow me to sit with these residents and then get with you to provide some options, if there's any. And if there's not, then we have to have that conversation with the residents. I think the important part of this is that they brought a petition in order for us to look at it. And I think that we need to exhaust all avenues, options, suggestions before, giving a final answer.
Understood. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know what your thoughts are.
Can we postpone till the next meeting?
Well, I wanted to make a recommendation to Mr. Gallinat to come back and report back to this council with all available options after speaking with the developer for the residents' sake. That's my motion.
Second.
Ruben Reyes?
I'm sorry, the constituent wanted to speak again. I don't know if you want to suspend the rules. She raised her hand. Can you speak up in your microphone, please?
We should let her speak. Motion to suspend the rules and let the constituent.
He already made a motion.
So you seconded?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ruben Reyes?
Yes.
Cesar Nevares?
I think he froze.
He froze.
Yeah, he froze.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, we can hear him, yes.
Okay.
Alejandro Garcia?
Can you hear me?
Aye.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're frozen, but we can hear you.
Rudy Cruz?
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Thank you, Ms.
Ramos?
Ramos.
Mayor, Council, as you know, I'm Angelina Ramos. Sorry. Mayor, Council, just to say that Mr.
So it doesn't
Cruz,
disconnect.
he mentioned that the lights would be in our in our living room. That's not what we're worried about. We're worried about our privacy and our safety, because they're gonna be seeing exactly what we're doing and what we're not doing, what time we come in, what time we leave, etc. All they have to do is just sit in their cars in the parking lot of Wayne Daddy's, and they're gonna be observing everything. Who lives there, who doesn't live there, that's what we're worried about. That's why we don't need little shrubs, we don't need little trees. We need a barrier that they cannot see into. Our parents and grandparents, we're gonna be very worried, if our kids are out there. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Ruben Reyes?
Yes.
Cesar Nevares?
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia?
Aye.
Rudy Cruz?
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Moving on to city manager, item number 26, discussion and action to negotiate a month-to-month basis agreement with Dannenbaum Engineering Professional Services for general engineering services of existing work orders and authorize city manager or her designee to execute month-to-month agreement.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Our contract with Dannenbaum ends on March 31st, 2022. We are going out to bid. We're preparing those documents. In the meantime, I'm asking permission to contact Dannenbaum to see if we can work out an agreement of a month-to-month basis, working on the work authorizations that exist at this time. Do you all have any questions?
No, I think,
Mr. Faiz?
no, I think, they need to finish their projects, and if the contract's over, we need to figure out until when they're gonna finish and have their pay.
Correct, and we're just asking to go month to month until the bid processing is finalized.
Mayor, we have a speaker for this item, Mr. Massoud.
Mayor, Council, Mr. Darte, and of course, Commissioner. Good evening to you all. Appreciate all your hard work. Late night, this is pretty late. We support the city manager and whatever she wants to do. We have no issues with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ruben Reyes?
Yes.
Cesar Nevares?
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia?
Aye.
Rudy Cruz?
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Moving on to mayor and council, item number 27, discussion and action to direct staff to research the installation of solar streetlights from a third-party vendor.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
I'm not gonna take a lot of time. Self-explanatory. We have not issues, but we're paying El Paso Electric for the lights. Sometimes they're real busy doing whatever they do. They won't have time to do maintenance on ours or taking a little bit longer. If we could figure out, have a staff, find a company that can come over and probably provide prices on solar lights, street lights, and the city will not have to worry about the maintenance on it. We'll just let that company take care of it. That's
You're proposing that city staff go research the installation of solar lights within the city limits of Socorro, not necessarily
no, just, yes.
Oh, not the El Paso Electric light poles. It would be.
We couldn't even touch those.
We can't touch them, but we can identify which ones are city light poles, right?
I don't think we don't have any city light poles. Everything's El Paso Electric. The city can't touch them. There's no subcontractor that can touch them, only El Paso Electric.
So then we would need to engage in some type of agreement with them allowing us access?
No. Oh,
Mr. Rodarte?
Okay, so I think Mr. Reyes is trying to do like moving forward. So we do own a couple of streetlights, like the new subdivisions, like Nuevo Hueco Tanks Road. Those streetlights are ours, but most of the inventory do belong to El Paso Electric. We talked about retrofitting them into an LED. However, the retrofit, El Paso Electric will not allow us to outsource to a third-party vendor and work on their poles, right? So that's creating a challenge. Secondly, I think that what Mr. Reyes is trying to do is that he has identified, because I know they've received several complaints, every day or once a week about my neighborhood is too dark. So he's trying to provide alternatives in moving forward, just not to rely on El Paso Electric, right? Because sometimes it takes 6-7 weeks, and then they do come out, the light starts working for 2-3 weeks, and then it's out again. And I think what Mr. Reyes is trying to do is just provide options. That way we don't have, we just don't rely on one vendor, right? And the solar lighting, it seems like, if we do the research, it seems that municipalities in other areas are moving to solar light. It's high efficiency, just better for your environment. And I think it's beneficial to the city that we go out and research and maybe bring them more information, cost analysis, and provide you all to see if that's something that you all want to bring in. Yes? Okay.
Can we also research grants for this?
Correct. So before we did anything else, we can definitely look at grants, but I'm pretty sure there is funding out there that we can tap into.
Okay, perfect.
Ruben Reyes?
Yes.
Cesar Nevares?
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia?
Aye.
Rudy Cruz?
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 30, discussion and action on approving city manager's evaluation.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Well, I had
Mayor, may I?
Mr. Martinez?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor and Council, Jim Martinez, City Attorney. I simply wanted to apprise Council. This does qualify as a personnel matter within the meaning of the Texas Government Code. It is required to be addressed in closed session and executive session. There was one exception when the employee who is the subject of the personnel item themselves requests that it be discussed in open session. I have asked Ms. Rodarte if she had a preference about that issue, and she has asked that it be addressed in open session.
Thank you. I just have a comment on this. I was thinking of moving this to June. Most of us on council have had more time than others. We've had a year or more to see her work and what she does with the city. So there's one of us on council that has a few months, and I would like to give him the courtesy of moving this to June, just so he has enough opportunity to work with her and give her a fair evaluation. That's my comment.
Motion to approve? Already has a motion.
We had a motion.
Well, I have a question.
Mr. Cruz?
When was the last evaluation done on the current city manager? What's the date?
I was hired October 7th of 2013 as the HR director. I was never evaluated by our former city manager. I did become interim in April of 2015, signed my contract in 2016, and I have never been evaluated since then.
Mayor,
Mr. Nevares?
if I may, I mean, you guys keep mentioning new council members, but an evaluation's an evaluation and it's past due, and she just provided the last, I mean, it's never been done. Some of us have served in council for a second term already. So this is long overdue. Let's get it done.
No, I understand what you're talking about, and I understand that, as I said, there's more of us that have spent with her maybe a year or more. It's just one council member has maybe spent 2 months. How is that giving her a fair evaluation when most of us have spent a year or more with her?
Well, then let them
Which
bring
council
up their
members?
concerns or whatever issues they have.
I'm speaking about Mr. Cruz.
I was sworn in November. That's more than 2 months.
Okay, more than
Yeah.
2 months.
So
I'm sorry, I apologize.
I'd like, well, this is my recommendation. In the past, how have evaluations been done? I would like to push for an executive session for the evaluation of the city manager. That way I can also get feedback from former city council people as well, and I can get your input. And then we can invite Ms. Rodarte back into the room, and then we can discuss the evaluation that took place. Mr. Martinez, does that sit well?
No, sir. The option, it lies with the employee, and there's a default. The default under state law is it shall be done in executive session unless the employee asks that it be done in open session. And if the latter occurs, then it will be done in open session.
But when you say the employee request for it to be done in open session, does that need council approval? Or that's the request being made by the employee, and that's what we have to follow?
The latter. That the state law is, it's one or the other. And the triggering event is the request from the employee. If the employee elects, basically, it's done in open session. You certainly can go into executive session to discuss the evaluation for limited purposes. You cannot go into executive session to deliberate the evaluation itself. But you can always go into executive session on almost any item to consult with your attorneys. So if you had legal issues that you wanted to address, if you had questions for me or questions about how things can or cannot be done legally, that could be done in executive session. If it's a general discussion of her performance, whether it's good, bad, otherwise, what other representatives think of it, given her election, that must be done in open session.
Ms. Rodarte?
Yes, and I just kind of want to make a comment to that, is that, you know, in the past years, I've been here, I'm going on 9 years. You know, I've been through a lot, right? So I have nothing to hide, and I think that I am very comfortable in getting constructive criticism if that's what they're going to do. I'm not opposed to them wanting to go into executive session because I don't want to seem like I'm being difficult. I just have nothing to hide. So whatever it is that you all want to air out in front of the public, you can. I don't have a problem with it. I don't think I ever have. I think that my privacy has been violated in 2018, so there's nothing at that point that I would be afraid that it would come out in this public forum. And that's why I choose, and if anybody knows me, I think I have never asked them to go into executive session if they're going to discuss me. I have nothing to hide. However, I don't want to make it seem like I'm being difficult. I mean, if that's something that they want to be and they feel strongly about, then go ahead, right? I just want to make sure that I place it on the record that I would prefer it not going to executive, but if that's what council wishes, I'm here to serve you all. I'm just here to serve you and my community, right? But I respect, you're my bosses. If that's something that you wish to do, then you can do so.
So I have a question.
One moment, please. Mr. Garcia?
I would like to call for the question.
Ruben Reyes,
Call for,
for the question.
The question.
oh, yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz.
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 33, discussion and action to consider adoption of a written charge stating the basis for removal of Board of Adjustments Jasmine Mendoza and direct city attorney to prepare the written charge.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz.
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Do we have a motion to go into executive?
Motion.
Second.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz,
Yes.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Muted.
It's 9:46.
Unmuted.
We are now in regular session. It is 9:53 PM. This meeting is called to order. Do we have a motion to delete items, the first three?
37, 38, and 39.
Motion to delete 37, 38, and 39.
Second.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz.
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 40, discussion and action to approve the land acquisition for the Bovee Bridge replacement project.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz.
Yes.
And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Item number 41, update on project logo application for Chapter 380 Economic Development Incentives.
Motion to approve.
Second.
So it was an update, that
update.
doesn't have to.
Oh, it's an update, I'm sorry.
Just maybe delete?
My bad.
Delete, okay.
Motion to delete.
No action.
Second.
There's no action required.
No action required. Motion to do no action.
So there's no
Motion
action on
to
this.
adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Somebody.
Ruben Reyes,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Alejandro Garcia,
Aye.
Rudy Cruz. And Ivan Colom Villalobos is absent.
Meeting adjourns at 9:55 PM.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good night.
Good night.